Hey guys, Kinggath here with another episode of the Kinggath podcast, and today my guest is one of the designers of the Rise of the Commonwealth settlements, and you will have just seen one of his recent masterpieces, which is the Nuka World Red Rocket build. Welcome, FanciestMoon. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going? I'm FanciestMoon. I am a goblin that hides in the shadows and crawls out to build stuff, and slinks back forward. You may not have heard of me.
They've had to have seen your name by now, though, because your name is on some of the best designs in Rise of the Commonwealth. In fact, you are part of the deadly duo that spent months and months on the Finch Farm design.
Oh gosh, all the pleasant memories of Finch Farm. Me and Don, we really built a blood pact with that one.
Were you involved in all of the rebuilds too, or were you? Because I know you did the regression, and you did the regression a lot differently than we did in the other ones. In that, because you actually told a story with your regression, whereas most of the other ones we kind of just did simplifications as opposed to like trying to show something happening.
Yeah, I was a part of the rebuilds. I remember when we had the whole the combined items disaster and everything, when we realized we couldn't use we couldn't delete
Scrap
like anything
everything
anymore. And me and Don were mourning our losses on that one, and
I guess we should explain that one to anyone listening. As we found out midway through development, well, I wouldn't say midway through. It was fair. It was early enough that it wasn't a complete train wreck, but probably a month and a half into development of Rise of the Commonwealth, we found out that when we tested the city code with scrap everything involved, that everything fell apart, and it would just so we had to restart a bunch of builds. It was not cool.
That having to go back and work on so many settlements that we realized, like a lot, sometimes from the ground up, like Finch had to be pretty destroyed to fix that and everything. God.
Yeah, I think we lost a couple of people when that was discovered, because I remember we had a very big team at the start, and like now we're down to a nice scrappy. I don't know. There's 6 or 7 of us left that worked on that originally, but there were quite a few more people involved at the beginning. But that was definitely one of those trying moments where I think a lot of people got pretty discouraged.
Yeah, there have been a few times where I've come close. I'll admit, there's been a couple. Although oddly enough, it was rarely stuff like this of just some horrible thing going wrong. And it's the simplest thing of like when I'd be working on a settlement and then Fallout would just crash, like no warning, no nothing, just hard close itself. And I would just realize I don't remember when I last saved and how much I just lost.
That was brutal. And I know. And then Don was yelling at me after creating. I waited to create Workshop Plus until we were essentially done with the project. And you guys could have desperately used all of these features like Workshop Save throughout the project.
Oh, there's been times where I've lost like a few hours worth of work. The worst being, I wouldn't say a day, but like almost half a day's worth of work. And I was just like, I have to do all of this again. I'm done. Yeah. I can't. I would actually just close it and just walk away from my computer and just not touch it for like a day or something.
Those are the times when you would disappear for a week, probably.
Probably. It hurts. It hurts so bad, especially when I was doing detailing or something, and just all the little minutia that goes into that, the love and care of just placing every little random chair and jet dispenser just sitting around, and it's just all gone.
Yeah, especially with how awkward it is to work with the place everywhere rotations. Like if you try and do stuff on the on the X and Y, like the amount of effort it takes to get that right.
Oh, you're bringing back, this is some PTSD right here. You're bringing back memories of fighting with those little things and everything. Because some of those objects, like their axis of rotation, are real weird or off from the center of the object. And so when you try to like start rotating them, you got to fight with that thing to get in the position you want to. I can't even, there's so many objects that are like that, I wouldn't even know to begin with it, honestly.
Yeah, it's interesting how the origins are on a lot of those items, because they're not designed to be rotated by the player. They're all designed to be rotated in the creation kit. Like they're set up so that when you drag them into place, the origin will land in a place that makes sense when you're working in a 3D tool, but it totally blows up when you try and do it in a player environment, like, because that's just a different perspective. So then you want the origin, we expect the origin to be in the center, and it never is. It's always like in the bottom center, or on some of those objects like the clothing and stuff, it's usually like if someone were wearing it, it's where their feet are. So then it's like floating way below the item. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff like that going on.
There's a lot of items where, the axis of rotation is just way, like, it's not even attached to the object. It's attached to some invisible, like, part of the object that you can't actually see. And so when it rotates, it just wildly flies off to the side, just kind of floating around on, like, some invisible disc you don't see. It's just like, oh, all right, well, bye, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of that's my fault, because when I was building some of the custom models out of existing stuff, so when Robotin was helping us, he was taking models apart correctly and resetting their origins and building nice collision. I had so many tasks under my belt that you guys would ask me to take parts off of models, and so I would literally just delete the rest of the pieces of the model, so then you'd end up with chunks of the collision from the old model still there, and then the origin is offset, and like those are my fault. I apologize.
Oh, well, I mean, I can't exactly blame you with how many damn things are in the tool. We already are whipping Don to death trying to organize the damn thing.
Right, please put these in categories. Yeah, those tools are pretty massive. It's like we're well over 10,000 items now, especially once we get the Nuka World version organized and set up for release. Like, people are going to be pretty stunned by that, because that adds a lot of cool new stuff.
I know. There's one, like, as we're nearing the end and everything, and I've been looking at, like, what am I going to do after this? Am I going to play Fallout after this and everything? And I think back to my old builds from before all this and everything, the stuff that I did on my own time, and I'm just like, God, I don't think I could go back to those. Like, I don't think I think I've improved enough as a builder over this time, and especially gotten so used to the tools we have, that to go back with all that old stuff, because, like, with my old things, I didn't use Place Everywhere, like, at all. I was blissfully ignorant of the wonder and at times infuriating just pain that it can be. Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, I think my old builds would just drive me insane. My inner decorator and everything would just be racking against me.
Yeah, it's I always have trouble with it, and I mean, this is why I invented Sim Settlements, is because I was putting in the effort, like I can see you guys doing in my sanctuary in my last playthrough I was doing, which was now over 2 years ago, and the amount of hours I put in just to do my house, like just to do like the player home, and I was just like, oh my God, if I have to do that to every single settlement, I'm gonna go insane. I can't do it. Or like, I'd build up like a bunkhouse for my settlers, and I'm like, I don't even want to decorate this. I just don't care. So then it was like, as soon as I got myself to a point where I'm like, well, I don't care about the decorating of that, then it kind of takes you out of it, and you're just like, well, screw it all then. Like, if I'm not going to do it all perfect, I'm not going to do any of it perfect.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think back of what all my vanilla settlements are. I've been working on these so much, it's like my brain has just kind of assumed them into it.
Yeah. You must have done great work, because I had a lot of applicants and I only picked out a handful of people to come join the team. So your stuff was better than what I was building at the time.
I think, it's funny actually. When I originally was coming forward to help in the project, I actually was intending to join in as a writer, but I didn't have any recent pieces of writing that I felt would be like fit to, be like, hey, this is what I can do and everything. I only had old stuff, and as I'm sure any person who dabbles in writing can tell you, handing over any of your old stuff, you would rather die than do that. Right. A lot of the times, because you look at your old work and you're just like, I hate everything that this is, and I hate myself for making it.
I think that's the creator's dilemma. I feel that way about all my code. I just had a conversation with somebody about Sim Settlements, and about how if anybody saw my code, they would wonder how the mod actually ran. And they're like, oh, no, I've decompiled it. It's not that bad. And I was like, no, to me, it's horrible. I feel like a criminal.
Oh God. Yeah, and so I didn't have any pieces I felt were worthy to be given. So I was like, oh, dang, is there anything else I could really do? And I considered offering for voice acting, but I didn't have like a sound setup at the time. And so I was like, well, I think I'm an okay builder. Like I thought I was all right. And so I just threw what I saw was my best build. Although looking at the builds we do now, and especially the design principles I've made now, none of my old builds would possibly be able to be a settlement in Sim Settlements. Like just pathing alone, that's not going to happen. They'd have to be burned.
We've definitely upped our own standards quite a lot along the ways, because like and that's why it took us, like, we got I think 24 done by release, and then we've released since then another, I want to say 8, maybe more. 8 to 10 we've released since then, and it took us more time than it took us to do the first 24 because we've been kind of up in the bar each time. I would say you have become one of the best, and we'll let the audience judge that, because you did you were the lead on Mechana Slayer and then the recent Nuka World Red Rocket, which I know right now while we're talking it hasn't been released, but by the time this podcast makes it out it will have been, so people will know about that. Gotcha. And the two of those designs are incredible. They really look good. They to me they feel like something, if they were in the game by default, you would have assumed they were done by professionals.
Well,
mad props to you, sir.
Oh man, side on to Mech Layer. That was a really interesting one. Mech Layer. There was a lot of really weird design stipulations I had to figure out with that. Of like, you can't build anything. You're so confined in that small space, and I had to figure out a way to pack just everything in there, and then still make it thematically correct too, no less. I really enjoyed that, but that was like a genuine challenge to figure out what I could make where I didn't need to like blatantly explain what it is, like the drug den that's in there and everything. I wanted to make things that anyone could walk in and be like, oh, that's what this is and everything. And not just have a big fat sign that says,
right.
Inject here now.
Although I really appreciate your dentist sign. That one I think needed it, but it was so worth it, because those little brain guys in Mech Layer are amazing. Basically our best asset.
I love those little things. And I get ahead of myself a lot of times when I make these designs, because there's so many ideas that just run through my head that I want to just go wild with. But it's like, I cannot reasonably ask you to try to make some of the things I want.
One of the things I actually have on my long to-do list, so in all of these settlements we've released, I always find little things where I'm like, oh, we should do that too. But I tend to, I'm one of those people that will let my imagination feature creep, but then I hold myself back because I want to get stuff released. Like, I actually think that it's important that you ship. And I have a list of things I want to add to every settlement. And one of them I really want to add to Mech Layer is you had created these like really bizarre looking robots. They look like floating assaultrons with no arms and legs. And
yeah, they
added a lot of character.
The
Watchers. They added a lot of character to the build because they just were so bizarre looking that they felt kind of ominous. And so we've got that, spoiler alert, we've got that bot making machine, and it only creates robo brains right now, but I already have a template of it in my head, and actually Matigio has already pulled it off for Industrial City, so I could ask him for help. But I want to set it up so that you could build a template in the little terminal for that robot machine and create anything. And I was going to save a default template for your funky robot. But it's just like, there's a bunch of programming involved in that, and it's like, it's hard for me to justify that when we have all these other projects going on. But it's one of those things where, just like I went back and touched up Murkwater and added that really cool what do you call it, that crane that has the torch on the top that Fuji designed, and Cookie built the model for. I wanted to like go do that type of thing to all the other settlements at some point, like go add some extra flavor to them. And that's what I'm going to do to Mech Layer, is get you those sentries in there at some point.
Oh gosh. Well, that's one thing. And it's funny because a lot of, like, when I've handed off the settlements to like regressors or something like that, they always note of like, what's up with all the settlers here? I always try to like set how I would think, like how I would make the settlement look, and what I would, be as like its optimal. Like I dress all the settlers like in mech layer, in like, they're either dressed dingy, they look like beggars or something like that. Some of them look like raiders. They're wearing like the like robot armor and things like that. And like that's why I added those bots. It was to help create the feel of the settlement, how I felt like it should be. If I could directly import, the player into this world that I've built and everything, and just be like, this is what I think it should be like, and here are the people that I think would be inside of it, and what they would look like, what they'd wear, what robots would be mumbling about the place.
Having built the trailers for these settlements, I very much appreciate that effort, because it made it a lot easier to do a thematic trailer for them when all the characters just fit right in nicely.
I mean, and it's the same thing with Nuka World and everything. Every settler I spawned in to, populate the place and everything, and give it. I wanted to see like where settlers like would conglomerate and everything. Like when nighttime came, when they all got off work, where are the points in the settlement that they all walked over to and everything. And I would dress them all up as raiders, the ones that I could at least.
Yeah, it looks great. And I noticed that again, like when I'm cutting video, it's just like, oh man, I don't even have to, because that's normally the type of thing that I would do in advance, but you've already done it and did a great job of it, so it was real easy to just be like, oh, all right, we can use this footage immediately without having to do any tweaking.
It's one of the weird little things I do, like when I start like running out of ideas, or like I've been working for a while, and it's like, all right, let me break myself off of this for a sec, so I, kind of as a refresher, I go around and like do little things like that, like dress up all the settlers in their little cute little outfits and everything, and get them looking for the big show. One weird habit I have, and I don't know why, I feel like it's whatever part of my mind is just a machine, as I'm sure Don and like a lot of people who picked up my builds will notice, I have like mountains and mountains of just stuff in my inventory all the time.
Oh yeah.
And I would just go ahead.
I was gonna say one of the mods on my list to create is a dump everything out of my inventory button, because of having to work with your save files. Of like all of a sudden I can't move very quickly.
I never understood why everyone's not always in God mode when they're building. Like that never made sense to me. If they like, why are you carrying so much stuff? I'm like, just go in God mode. I always
but we say
the
same thing. We say the same thing about why do you have all this stuff in your inventory if you're in God mode, because you don't need resources in God mode. That's where you say touche, because we got you there.
I mean, yeah, that's fair and everything. It's like it's a weird like just sort of thing I do where like I'll go to like the gun stations or something, and just for no real particular reason, just start fiddling with upgrades on guns and everything. Like just what I can feel myself like I'm working for so long that the quality of what I'm making is sort of going down, and I'm like, okay, take a step back.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to do that a lot with the stuff I work on. Is I have to take regular breaks, even though I know I want to put in the time. It's just like I know my mind's gonna get fuzzy, and I'm gonna start taking shortcuts or making poor decisions. And so for me, it's like every 2 hours I gotta take a 20 or 30 minute break just to make sure that I don't make bad decisions. It's kind of like don't go shopping hungry, don't go to the grocery store hungry, or stuff like that. Like don't go in with these crazy urges, because they're gonna just make you make poor decisions.
Yeah, I've mostly just learned to like get off step away from my computer and like just kind of I just meander about the house, honestly, just for a little bit, just thinking on what I've made so far and what I plan to do and everything. Maybe go get a drink or snack of some sort.
So now, do you have any type of design background? Like you really have an eye for it. I've noticed that in all of your settlements is that you just like you clearly you put a lot of effort into making it feel real. Like all of your designs feel like they really belong. There's a lot of you can see where things have been lived in. You can see that there's a purpose to everything, and just like those extra little touches you put in, or like the fact that you take all the time to put the characters and outfits, like there's something there. You've got some sort of innate ability for that. So I'm wondering, do you have any type of background professionally in it?
Honestly, no, I don't. Though you're not the first person to ask something like that. I mean, the most design background I could have is like just honestly playing other games in which you build stuff and everything. Really, I mean, I don't know if like Minecraft or something counts, but I mean that. Whoops, sorry. No, I never really had any professional experience in design or anything. It's just something I kind of have a knack for. I mean, I can't really think of any way to like explain it. Any
No, that's fair.
Magic rule or anything.
I mean, it might just be that you just have maybe you have an obsession with detail, and it just works out perfectly for that. But we appreciate it, and I think everybody who plays Sim Settlements is rewarded from your whatever it is that makes you do that all that work.
Oh, thanks. I can't think of something there. And this like goes into a bit of like what some of my design principles are. Is that there's one thing I've noticed throughout all Fallout games, all Bethesda games, really, and that's not fair. Not just Bethesda, just any big open world games like this. It's whenever you find little details in the world that just break it a little bit. And it's like most people won't pay attention to this stuff. And I can definitely see as I've been building more, I've learned like what are like say some of the tricks that a designer or builder may use to, like hide an object or something or to cut time and everything, but still get the same, effect and desired look you want. And it's like I notice all these little details around in just the world and everything of like if an object's like slightly clipping through the floor or something like a piece of furniture is, I'll be like, oh, the guy, whoever Bethesda employee put that there, like, oh, that's missing and everything. And it's those little things that nag me. And I think that's a good bit of what drives me to like detail the way I do and everything. Like I try as hard as I can to not let anything clip through a wall at all, if possible.
Oh man, you must get a little PTSD when you look at some of our sanctuary design.
Don't bring me back to sanctuary. Of all the builds that you've had me do and everything, like which ones I've either chose for myself or that you've asked me to do, that was probably one of the worst ones. Finch was bad in that it was just a nightmare behind the scenes and everything. Like there was just so much going wrong that we had to go back and fix and everything. And like, we'd get through a certain level or a certain way through it and then just be like, oh fuck, dude, this isn't going to work. Like we got to go back. And I'm like, oh god damn it. All right, fine. But Sanctuary, when I dropped in there fresh and saw what that was, I was like, what? Who made this? What is this?
Yeah, I'm one of the few that absolutely loves his design style. And he's no longer on the team, but when his stuff, he builds it almost like he treats his designs kind of like each of the pieces of junk. It's almost like he sculpts with them. So they'll just be like, he really wants a certain look. So he'll layer all these things and clip them through the floor and walls until they form this thing from certain angles. And I think it looks really cool, but it's, to a lot of people, it's probably OCD inducing, and other people are just not. Anybody who really likes the straight edges, his Bacon's builds are not for you. So that like Murkwater, Sanctuary, Starlight, like there's just so many points that where if you dig around, you'll just find that it's like, there's 10 pieces of floor edged in such a way to make it look like it's a spiral or something, like stuff like that, where it gives a really good look just from a distance, but as soon as you get up close, it's like, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I hate like everything he's built and everything. Like there were definitely parts of Sanctuary that I genuinely liked. I thought the reactor room was pretty cool, and how he put that all together. It was really cramped and everything as it should have felt. But there were so many things that just like were like just so claustrophobically stacked on top of each other, just items and everything. And it would always like, part of my mind would always be reeling of like, is this pathable? Oh god, please tell me this is pathable. This all looks like just so crushed together and everything. Every time I'd walk through stairs and everything, or any ramp or any small pathway, I'm like, there's no way they're gonna get through this.
Yeah, that was one of the few I nav meshed, and I was shocked how well they were pathing through that place. Just shocked. In fact, every time I do a test in there, I end up doing the city plan tests all the time there, I always will find midway through, before the build's even placed down, there's NPCs walking upstairs and climbing around these bridges. I'm like, this is nuts that this works with how bad the pathing is in this game.
Oh man, that.
But yeah, I can see having to regress Bacon's builds would be difficult, because as you're trying to pull stuff away to be like, all right, I want to make a lower level of this, and then you find that there's a bunch of items underneath where, it makes it impossible to maybe do exactly what you want. That could be pretty stressful, I'd imagine.
It was almost the opposite of that. I could handle there being a ton of small items. Like I could deal with the tedium of having to sort through all those. The big issue was that there were very big items, big items used to cover holes. And when you take those away, you now have a huge gap that has just nothing there to cover it up anymore. And it's like, there were a lot of items in the build, especially at level 3, that were used in that way. And it's like, I can't leave these for level 2 because it wouldn't make sense for the settlement to have this at level 2. This is definitely a level 3 item. That's the best they've done.
Right.
And it's like, I now have to build this whole new section while I'm regressing and everything, because it's like, what am I going to do with this? There's now a giant hole in the wall and everything. It's just, the settlement's just big open now.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the whole thing was kind of a learning experience, because it was really hard because we didn't even do any regressions until pretty late in the project. So during the early builds, we had no idea what we were getting into. We didn't have any concept of which way to go with them. And we also, at the time, we were under the restriction of, if anyone, I don't know if people have pieced this together yet, that the first settlements we released, all of the plots can show up at level 0, which means that when you guys were regressing, you had to make sure that there was always some sort of part of the settlement everywhere. And it wasn't until the post-launch ones that you could delete plots as well. And then if you would have run into a situation like that, you could just be like, all right, I'm going to just take out this whole section. But that wasn't an option during the initial development. Every section had to exist in some form.
Yeah, that was a real pain when we couldn't touch any of the plots, because when we get to level 1 and 0 and everything, Finch was a good example of, I very strongly believe to not let the section that's up on the bridge, I did not want that to be accessible at level 1. And even at level 2, it's like, they may have barely just started putting stuff up there and everything. This is just a fledgling project for these settlers and everything. And it was like, no, we still have to have all that up there. And it still has to be pathable at 1. And I'm like, oh, God damn it. That doesn't, my designer in me is screaming that doesn't make sense. They shouldn't have this up here at level 1.
Yeah, that's one of those things where, sure, we could go back and do it over now that we have the technology, but man, I don't think the people involved want anything to do with that place again, because Finch has some. I know Don won't go back.
No,
but
he will leave before he does that.
That particular build has so many hours in it. Just literally hundreds of man hours put into that one design. So I hope everybody appreciates it. That's one of my favorites. I think it looks incredible. And I know Don thinks the first version looks better, but I like the new version. I really like the shops you guys did up there. You've got some really cool creative shops you've done. That was kind of where you were starting to show your talent on the team, was when you started designing shop fronts, because then you did it at Bunker Hill, you did it on Finch Farm, because you were mostly helping us with regression and design work before the post-launch, and then the post-launch you moved into lead design on the settlements. So I think the thing that really made me think that we needed to move you over to lead design was your shops, because you really crushed it on those.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's actually one of the harder things I had to figure out is to think of a shop idea unique to possibly not just what it sells, but especially the place and everything. Thinking back to Mechanist Lair, I wanted to think of some type of recreational space or something that wasn't just one of our rec plots and everything, because the rec plots are all right, but they don't fit Mech Lair. Mech Lair is a very unique place. Right. And so even a lot of the normal plots we have, I was like, they can't be here. This isn't a place for normal plots or normal people. This is some crazy techno slum hiding underground. And
I was actually the thing with Mech Lair that was really shocking to me, because I actually had never built the settlement in there. I did the quests and that was it. So then like when you were describing it to me, I'm like, oh, we can do all sorts of stuff in there, having no concept of what the size was until you started showing me tours of your early builds. I was like, oh man, this place is cramped.
Yeah, that was a genuine challenge. That was probably one of the tougher things I had to do was figuring out how to squeeze everyone in here while keeping it pathable. That was not easy. That place was real weird with its pathing. And
but
still
fortunately, you had
like,
your sentry bots to test it out for you.
Yeah. And keeping like the minimum requirements for like a functioning settlement, like having enough houses, having a food sources and everything, and blah blah blah.
Well, I also made it harder on you because we had that idea in our initial talk about it, about the robot factory, and then so like you had to leave the whole time. You had to leave space for this unknown machine. You had no idea what we were going to be designing for, and that took up a huge chunk of the space.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Going to say there were a few ideas I originally had to put in that empty space, and it like the whole time I was throwing around ideas of like what to put in there, like for the factory and everything, because it did drive me nuts a bit of that just being empty and everything while everything else is filled as I was making it, because I had no idea what like we were going to put in there, so I didn't know like where do I put the door, where do I put ramps, do I put windows or not, where do I set the lighting up around this thing so that it looks right and it looks natural, because I didn't have any clue what was going in there. I just knew I had to vacate the space for it.
Yeah, some of the ways we work on this are probably pretty backwards, but it's modding is such an interesting medium to work on, because it's not like producing an actual game or producing most things. It's not like producing theater or movies or music, in that everybody's a volunteer and you don't know who's going to be available when. So I often have to like do things in backwards orders or weird orders just so that we have a chance of releasing them at a reasonable date. So like that, for that one, it was like, well, I know we're not going to have anybody available to do a model for that machine anytime soon, but at the same time, if we want a chance in hell of releasing this in the next few months, we need to just build forward anyway with the settlement itself, and then there's all the post-processing that goes into the settlements. So that was one of those victims of just like the availability of artists at the time was limited, and we needed to proceed with a build anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely an appreciation I can understand for a lot of the Bethesda devs on these games, of like, and why I understand like the little mistakes that I mentioned earlier of like, oh, that thing's clipping through the floor. Oh, I can like see like in a crack in the wall, and I can see the, just empty void on the other side and everything. Is that all these guys have to build, this entire place and everything, and they are getting crunched on it and everything. I can definitely remember some settlements I've worked on that, oh man, you would be upset how close I've been cutting it with with some of them. As far as like when I hand it over to you, it is like the last minute of just like, all right, here you go, cool.
Yeah, it's been a lot more chill since post-launch, but pre-launch, it was getting pretty tight on the amount of, because the Rise of the Commonwealth has been, so basically with each of the new expansions, I've been like kind of ramping up the size of the team, and Rise of the Commonwealth started right around the same time, or it started around the time I was wrapping up development on Industrial Revolution. So it was a pretty small, scrappy team, but we were doing a crazy amount of work, and I was pretty hardcore about deadlines then. So we crammed a lot into a very short time. And I'm not sure which I prefer. Like I love releasing. That's so much fun. There's just so much excitement in the community and everything. But at the same time, it's not fun to burn people out, and that's kind of where. So that's I don't know what you appreciate. I get a thrill off of crunch time, but that's probably because I'm a bit of a masochist and I do it professionally. But I don't know. How do you feel about crunch time? About that the thrill of the deadline? Does that get you, or do you get annoyed by it and frustrated and want to quit?
Actually, I'd actually say it's a good thing for me. I've realized this both just in working this and just how I work in all things in general. I do a lot better under pressure. Like when I am given a hard deadline, it's a lot easier to make myself commit to, the time and the effort and everything to get these projects done. Like,
yeah.
Like as I was saying, like one thing's like, and it's a bad habit because I'll like procrastinate. I like do a little detailing here, a little building there, and just kind of mumble about for a while, and then like be like, "Hey, Fancy, how you doing? It's getting released in like a week and a half. Do you have good progress?" And I'll be like, "Yeah," and have like very little progress, and I will just blast through that thing in those few days and everything. I guess I'd say, if you knew how little progress there, on a few of these I've actually had done when you asked, like, hey, it's coming up in a week. Are you almost done? It's like, yeah, I'm almost done. I have nothing done.
Oh, jeez.
And I just like go insane and just churn it out as best as I can.
So what you're saying is I need to start. So what you're saying is I need to start lying to you about the release dates.
No. I have my limits, but I don't know what it is. I've always found myself to be a lot better when I'm under pressure and everything, and it really forces my mind to commit, and it just sharpens me down to be the best that I can at it.
Yeah, I tend to be similar in that, like that I work better under pressure. I've gotten past the. It used to be earlier in my life, it would be, I would need the pressure. Otherwise I wouldn't work at all. Now I've got enough discipline where I know that, I time out, I know how much work I have to do. And it's like, all right, well, I can't just ride on the pressure, motivation. I'm going to have to just force myself to get through some of this stuff, especially because, with the modding, there's like exciting stuff to do in the development. And then there's the tedious stuff. So like in our project, some of the like doing the nav meshing, very tedious, but it's got to be done. God. Or like a lot of times, like for example, I'm doing the Sim Settlements recode. The coding for me is really exciting, but having to go reset up all the records again, that's really tedious. But it's like, well, it's got to get done. So like stuff like that I've fortunately got the discipline to do that, piecemeal. But yeah, I feel you on the thriving under pressure is definitely my MO as well. And I think there are quite the people who survived through Rise of the Commonwealth and are still in the team are all that way, is what my theory is. Because all of you guys who stuck around are also the ones who like crunched with me at the end of December. Because I know you were part of that, where we were in those like last few days before release.
Oh,
we were all working like all day long, all night, trying to get all these things exported and corrected. And
oh gosh, yeah, I remember that. That was rough. Yeah, I think I was working on Finch at that time when we were just releasing like the base and everything. Oh yeah. Gosh, yeah, I was flying through that thing. And I remember like, I'd get like, it would either be you, Dawn, or Tank or something. Some hour every few hours is like, hey, how's the progress going? Hey, how's the progress going? It's like, it's fine.
Yeah, that reminds me. So for everybody who doesn't know this, on the day of release of Rise of the Commonwealth, and this is why Rise of the Commonwealth almost didn't hit its release date. In fact, for a lot of people, it didn't, because I think we released it at like 10:59 or something my time. So it was like 1 minute shy of midnight of release day of like the day after. So like not even midnight of release day, but like midnight, almost missing release date for Eastern time. We found out that morning that we forgot to put recruitment beacons and city planners desks in the earlier levels. So we had to go through and re-add so basically we had to go every settlement, find a good spot for the desks and the beacons, and then you guys would report to me the coordinates, and then I had to go manually enter them. Mm-hmm. And then we had to re-export some of the settlements because I wasn't able to do them manually. And it was like, oh man, it was just like all hands on deck for like 15 hours straight trying to get it out within a reasonable time. Like that was crazy.
Yeah, I can remember, like, especially with some of the settlements that don't really have a player home, and we'd have to like find somewhere that makes sense for this desk to go. And I can remember because I think Red Rocket was one of the ones that was missing one and everything, and I just like blew up a room and everything. It's like, it's just going here. I don't care what this was before. This is where it goes now.
Yeah. It ended up working and we got it out, but I felt that was just like one of those oversights because we weren't playing with it enough. We were so busy worrying about the creation and like making sure that it looked good and that it pathed, but we had like barely played around with the actual city plans themselves. So like things like the gameplay mechanics of it just were not on anybody's mind when we were doing it. And it was only on the last couple days of testing when people were like putting it, like especially the testing team, when they finally, because it takes a while for all of the gameplay elements to click to where they understand what's happening, because I don't document this stuff until after launch. And so like I will give them rough ideas, but it doesn't really fully form until those final couple of weeks. And it wasn't, so then like after a few tests of the final build, it was like, oh wait, like you mean I have to, so thinking about it from perspective of a user, it's like, wait, so I build a desk and then they scrap the place and they don't give me a replacement desk. And I was like, oh God, yeah, that does feel bad. Didn't even think about that. So stuff like that was, I hope not to make that mistake again. We'll put it that way, because that was too much.
I think probably one of the really useful things you added was that script where it basically checks the settlement. It's like, does it have a desk? Does it have a spawn point? Does it have the 3 attack points? You know, and just kind of runs real through. Because I remember like I can't remember exactly what the script was that we had, but we had to run it at each level. And we had a different one for each level. Checked them all. And I remember us realizing there were so many settlements and their different levels that didn't have that. Like whoever had made them didn't know they needed to run that each time they finished their build. And it's like, oh my God, like there could be something wrong with any of these and we have no idea. And we had to just like fly backwards and be like, go to this level, run this thing. Okay, destroy that, load up the other level, run this thing. And
so it was almost like we had like 100 settlements to do, because it was 24 settlements, each with 4 levels that needed to be tested.
Yeah, we were throwing around the files for that because some people had them, some people didn't. And then like there were some cases where we didn't have the correct master file sitting in the share and everything. And we're like, who has it? Who made this? And who's holding on to it? And we were like screaming at other certain people, like, you're the one who made this. Do you have the master files or not?
Right. Yeah. And then I think, and like I said, I could tell some people were burning out from that. I think Bacon was one of them, because he disappeared on us in the 0 hour. And I think he just didn't want, like, it wasn't fun anymore for him when we were dealing with all that pressure. And I get it. It's definitely not for everybody, especially when for a lot of people, this is just, you know, they're volunteering to just relax and just have some creative outlet. But, so yeah, not everybody was into that workflow. And I think that was what kind of tempered me. And I've slowed down a lot with the current stuff we're working on, just because, you know, it's supposed to be an enjoyable hobby. I mean, I still do try and set deadlines and keep us moving, but I recognized that last month of development was too much for a hobby project. Like, it was just, it was putting people on edge, because there were, like, I'm sure Bacon burned out from it, and there were a couple others that it was just like that wasn't fun, and they probably were really upset afterward, because essentially, like, we were all cracking the whip and yelling at each other about something that it really didn't matter. Like, I mean, the date mattered in the sense that we announced it and we wanted to be true to our word, but we didn't need to announce that date, for example, because nobody cared in that regard. But I personally, like, I'm going to continue to develop in that way of treating this like a company, and like treating our work as being important, that we do it correctly and that we hit release dates, just because from the player perspective, like, they now have like, there's, you look at all the games that are out there for free that are incredible, like Fortnite, for example. Like, it's not my bag, but that game is really well designed and it's completely free. And so, like, now mods are essentially competing with like AAA titles, because like, we're going to this free to service model, or like League of Legends, incredible game, completely free. I've never spent a dime on that game, but still had a great time with it. And so, like, there's all these free games you can play. Oh, you spent too much money on it?
Oh yeah.
So to me, that's kind of what drives me into doing these things. Yeah, I would not look. I like, that's how I feel about Hearthstone. I won't look about how much money I spent on that.
Hearthstone, baby. It was eventually the, like, really bad metas that got me to stop spending any money on that game. I was like, you know what? No, I think it was Karazhan was one of the ones that really did it. I was like, okay, this stinks.
I tend to drop off because I've never hit Legend. I get so close, and then I just don't, and then I burn out, and then I have to go away for a couple expansions and come back. Like I was like one game from Legend during the Pirate Warrior fiasco when that first came out before they started nerfing it to hell.
That sucked.
So I was one of those a-holes ripping through everybody with Pirate Warrior early on, and I'm sure people are happy.
Right. All right, I'm leaving the project now. Don't talk to me ever again.
I'm sure people are happy to hear that I missed my dream with Pirate Warrior and was knocked down from 1 star away from Legendary and never recovered. But yeah, I would spend crazy amount. I wouldn't spend crazy money. It was like I would buy like a 50 pack of packs and then spend all my gold on packs. And so, but still, like when it started out as a free game and then you're dropping, because that's like. Well, that was like $1 a pack, $1.50 a pack, something like that. So that's adds up pretty fast though. Still, when you consider like what you could spend on, you can buy Skyrim now. We buy it for like $15 or $20 or something.
I was gonna say, they throw it at you,
right? Even back in the day, buying it new, you bought it brand new, $60, another $25 for the season pass. So you spend $85 and you essentially get 50,000 hours of play out of it.
I was gonna say, and this is insane. I still have not finished Skyrim.
But have you played through it like more than 100 hours?
No. I've put thousands of hours into it. I think.
Right.
I've never finished the main campaign ever.
I went a long time before I did because I get a thrill out of the new characters. It feels so good to spin up a new character and do those early areas.
And like trying a different starting point or different experience with them and everything. And it's like I know how it ends and everything. But I don't know why. It's like some stupid part of my brain just doesn't want to do it until you've found everything you can. Like even Fallout 4, I still haven't beaten the main campaign. I know how it ends and everything, or at least, how it ends depend on which side you pick. But whatever.
Right.
I know the big secret and all that nonsense.
Right. There's no spoilers to worry about. So I had a talk with Gopher recently, and we got into Skyrim versus Fallout, and we were trying to figure out, why is it that Skyrim is so much more fun to start new characters on versus Fallout. I mean, I have started probably just as many in Fallout because I'm hooked on this game, but I at the end of our conversation, I did agree with him that I felt like Skyrim was more exciting to start new characters for, and I think part of that is because you almost each of like the holds is kind of their own little faction, and there's so many more of them, and they're all kind of independent, whereas in Fallout 4, you've got essentially 4 factions and they're all intermingled. So it's not like you really have a different experience if you go, like when you go do like the Thieves Guild, for example, in Skyrim, it's completely disconnected from the Mages Guild and the Warriors Guild and Dark Brotherhood. Whereas in Fallout 4, all of the factions are all intertwined. So it feels like you can't really have a different experience. Every time the experience is going to be roughly the same.
Yeah. I can really see that with Skyrim because it's like, and especially like the differences in just how from going all the way to like Winterhold or something and then going down to Rift and everything, like it just feels like you're in an entirely different place. Like one's in snow blasted wasteland damn near, and the other one's just a big boggy swamp that's just like gross and everything. Whereas like Fallout, like, other than being right in the middle of Boston and maybe the glowing sea, it's kind of just the same, like, ubiquitous, like, place and everything. Like, everywhere's kind of just like, it's bombed out. It's kind of shitty. There's some busted houses over here, some cars over there. Don't shoot them, they explode. Oh, look, a raider again. And more dogs again.
Oh, I'm not, and I don't even mean to knock on Fallout 4. I obviously love the game with the amount of hours I've got.
Oh no, yeah, I'm not passionate for this and everything. I mean, it's the nature of the setting. It's not its fault that it's like that and everything. You Boston is still at the end of the day Boston. You're not gonna walk from one side of the city to the other, and like one's a desert and the other one's a winter wasteland and everything. Right. It's like that's just not how it is. That's not realistic. Whereas Skyrim is supposed to span this entire country and everything, even though you can walk from one side to the other in pretty quick time, but that's what it's supposed to be and everything. Like it's an entire nation that has its own, separated biomes and everything.
I'm actually glad that they do that. And like, if they were to try and make, because I know some people long for the days of like Daggerfall where things were almost to scale to where you had like literal kilometers to travel. That would be so boring. Like the amount of travel, that's not me. I can't do that in my games. I know there's a lot of people who love it, who are just like, I would prefer, they want the realism, they want that feel of like, the travel is actually part of the adventure and it's a journey. It's like, nope, not for me. I like the scale. I think the Skyrim Fallout 4 scale is quite nice because it's a comfortable amount where by the time I'm done exploring it, I'm not bored yet. I don't know if I could do like a 2 scale continent. And I mean, maybe if they populated it as densely as they do, but like that would take, you'd have to have thousands of people working on the content for that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like half and half on that. I really don't like it when things get like super shrunk down and overcrowded. It was one thing I realized with Fallout 3 and everything, because I live near DC. I live like maybe 20, 30 minutes out, which, side note, interesting experience walking around what would essentially be the bombed out remnants of your home. But like I even went and found where roughly I would actually live, and I was like, no, there's a lot of death claws here. Cool. But it's like, I know like that area like off the back of my hand and everything. And so it's like being able to walk like from one thing to the other in like, 5 minutes or less or something like that. Like it can be weird and everything being able to do that. And it's like, I do kind of wish that everything was scaled up and like pushed away. There was more just to make it feel like it wasn't so crowded and everything. Like that's one kind of thing I did have a problem with Fallout 4 is like all the settlements are so close to each other. It feels like sometimes like if you can stand in one place and if you could put a map marker on each one and they're all within like your detection range.
Yeah.
It's like that feels like a little bit too much for me.
Well, it's also like a problem with the engine can't handle it either. That's almost where they needed to spread things out. And, but people always fault. That was one of the faults people had with New Vegas is that it's too spread out. Like it feels, because I think New Vegas has, I actually like the scale of New Vegas. I think it has kind of more what you're talking about where like the major locations are spread out enough that you definitely cannot get the map marker between too many of them at once. It's all, there's a fair distance between them. But that was, I think, the biggest complaint people had about New Vegas. Like, fantastic story, nice improvements to the gameplay, but then there's just a lot of dead space.
With New Vegas, I feel like that was them needing to be a lot more aware of their setting, and that, generally speaking, I feel like I can say this with confidence, in most games, no one likes the desert. Like, the desert is not the place that a lot of people typically like to either place their games. They don't like running around with their character because it's just a big ocean of sand. And, that's what a lot of New Vegas is. It's just big open desert and canyon and everything. Right. And that makes sense. I'm not saying that's wrong. That's what its setting is and everything. But it's like, there's really not a lot out there and everything. And so I think you need to be aware of that when you're designing like your map and everything of like, if they're just meandering through a bunch of empty desert and everything for like 20 minutes, it's like, well, this is some, impactful gameplay right here.
I think that's where like vehicles would have come in nicely to take care of that problem. It's
they have been dancing around why vehicles are not inside the game forever, and I've never felt like there's a satisfactory answer. That like
there was
believe.
There's a vehicle in Fallout 1. Like that's one of the first things or maybe it was in Fallout 2. One of the original Fallouts. I think it was Fallout 1. You get a car. Like they really went all in on the Mad Max thing.
If memory serves me right, it was 1.
Yeah, I think you had to have it was like one of the coolest unlocks because it took a while you to do some quests and get at it, and then you had to keep it fueled.
Don't quote me. It's been forever since I've.
I know. I'm already thinking like I bet I'm saying some of this wrong. Somebody will comment and correct us. Somebody who's played it more recently because they've been giving the game away a lot lately. Like the original Fallout collection, you can get it. Like I have like 3 copies of the original collection now because I owned it already, and then it came with 76, and it also came with. I had bought this like mini nuke, and it had the games inside of it. I was like, I just bought the mini nuke because it was a cool prop for my desk. And it had the original games in it.
Did it actually give you the floppies? Oh, baby.
I actually don't know. I should open it up and look at it again. I just left them in there. I think they're CDs, but maybe they're not. Maybe it's like where Fallout 4, you get the disc, and like inside was just a code for Steam.
Yeah. Oh my. If they put actual floppies in there, I would love them forever for that. That would be the funniest thing ever. Oh God, giving floppies to like just anyone nowadays.
Right.
I think
well,
I only
maybe
have
it'll
a
happen.
floppy
I can
drive
see it
sitting in
happening though.
Oh yeah,
like
just
think
for,
about
just for the
think about
lulz
like
of
with
it and all.
music, like everybody trying to bring back. I mean, they're bringing back freaking cassette tapes just for the nostalgia trip and like and to stand out. Like I got it when they did vinyl. Like there's an argument to say that vinyl has a more interesting sound to it. There is no argument for a better sound with cassette tapes.
Yeah,
ever.
I'm gonna say cassette tapes are they're garbage. I hated cassette tapes. I hate them now. I think I have one of like a God, not a Walkman, but close to it. Of like a little hip cassette player that you can attach to your belt and everything's sitting somewhere and everything. The only thing I have left that it works is a radio cassette. Basically,
okay.
like you put it in there and everything, and it just acts as a radio and everything, and you run it through, and you can tune it with I think that was the volume knob or something. It was a weird little thing.
Huh. Yeah, so people are into stuff like that. So I could see, like a resurgence of floppies, but you would want the problem with floppies. What people won't remember from the, like they'll get on the nostalgia trip and they'll forget that it wasn't just about the fact there's a data limitation. It was also that they were slow as hell. It was like it would take forever to copy. If you had a full floppy disk, it could take forever. Granted, now if you set up, I'm sure that they could make a floppy drive or a floppy disk reader that's pretty fast. But man, that would not be a fun nostalgia trip. It's not like, with at least with like things like the cassette tape, you hit play and it basically plays immediately. With the discs, as you're not going to get instant read off of them.
I mean, first of all, have fun finding any floppy disk drive that's actually going to work. Now, I bet there's somebody out there on eBay. Yeah, see, somebody on eBay is sitting on like 10,000 of them still. And they're selling them for a couple bucks. Oh God, I think I have one just because I'm a psycho who doesn't throw his computer stuff away easily. I think somewhere buried in like I have a drawer just full of computer parts, and it might be buried somewhere in there.
I definitely don't have any floppy drives or discs left, but I did hold on to a zip drive and discs for way too long.
Oh baby.
Like those I couldn't get myself to get rid of, and I think it was because I had in high school I'm sure I pirated it. I had a copy of 3D Studio Max, and I had taught myself to 3D model, and I remember I just thought I can never lose these models I created. I'm sure they were complete garbage. Like I was 14 or 15.
Oh, yeah.
Like what could I do?
I mean, yeah, it's like when you look at your old work and everything, they're like, no, I can't. No, this is.
Yeah, I think something about them being on those discs, and I didn't ever get to see them because I didn't have any way to load the discs, didn't have the software anymore. That in my head they were masterpieces still, and so like I think I kept those till like my late 20s. So like that, and that's now feels like forever ago. So like those zip drives I kept way too long.
I still have. I don't know, because I've been in the process of my folks moved out of where I live, so right now I've just been like, everything's been getting thrown around the place, and I have like a stack of old floppies, and some of them are like, oh God, I think one of them has like tax documents on them that are I think my parents. Some are pictures, and I remember one because I put when I was younger I drew like a thing on it. Is SWAT 2, and I will never get rid of that.
Yeah, there's definitely some of those.
Probably doesn't work anymore. I haven't checked in a while, but floppies are not exactly known for their longevity.
Yeah, I think some of that you keep for the nostalgia of like it's just like a little memento, not anything you actually want to run. I had held on to, and I actually they're actually worth money now. I had held on to my favorite Super Nintendo games through forever, and I gave them to my brother-in-law, I think, a couple years ago, and now I've seen like a copy of Chrono Trigger is worth like a small fortune if you've got like an original SNES Chrono Trigger cartridge in packaging, and it's like I just gave all those away because I was like, I'm not going to do any of this gaming, and now they put out all the like the throwback systems, like the classics, like you can get Genesis and Nintendo and everything,
PlayStation 1 thing where it just has
PS1.
all the God. I've considered getting stuff like that before. Oh, here's every Nintendo 64 game packed into one thing.
Right.
But it's like I also recognize it's like there's a lot of games from back then that I really liked. I probably won't like them as much as I did when I was a kid because A, my tastes have changed, and B, I've beaten myself to not let nostalgia get in the way of my enjoyment of things, or recognizing like, no, this was a bad game. Like I can definitely think back at like games that I really liked as a kid, and I'll look back at them like that was a crap game. I was a stupid kid.
Yeah, it's tough to go back and play them. I've tried to play those, the old Fallout games, and I can't do it anymore. It's too clunky.
I tried that too, not terribly long ago, and I was just like, no. I loved you back in the day, but no, this just ain't gonna work out. I'm sorry.
The ones I think I could get into again, just because of riding the nostalgia, would be the multiplayer stuff. Like, I bet I could have a good time, at least for an evening, of like getting some friends together and playing like GoldenEye or the original Mario Kart or something. Like some of those games, those like party games, like stuff you played with a group of friends. Because a lot of people are joking now, especially with 76, that anything, like getting punched in the face is more fun with friends. Like everything is fun with friends versus single player. And so like I think some of those old nostalgia trips I could still ride if they were multiplayer games, but the single player stuff, yeah, I see too many. I think part of it is I'm spoiled. It's like, you have all these way better gaming experiences now that it's like, why do I want to go play with all these horrible like all these things that have terrible quality of life, terrible graphics, terrible sound by comparison. And I think I could get over some of it if I was just riding in the nostalgia. But when I'm by myself and I have only so much time to game or to relax or whatever, like I tend to not, it's harder for me to sit and just drip in the nostalgia. But I think if I'm just hanging out with people and we're all just talking about memories and we're experiencing them, I think that could change it.
Yeah, there's definitely a few games I could, like you say, Mario Kart, oh man, I would destroy you in Mario Kart Double Dash. Oh gosh, I can't think of how many hours I played in that. GoldenEye was good too. Although I was partial on Perfect Dark personally.
Oh,
they were both
Perfect
good,
Dark.
but I like Perfect Dark more. Battle Tanks. Oh man, only the 90s kids will remember. That I played the hell out of that game. That was also Nintendo 64.
Yeah, there were some great games in there. That system really opened things up. Really changed the
one of the sad things with me, because it's a series that after I played it, I really enjoyed it. Was the first time I played Command and Conquer was the Nintendo 64 port of it.
Oh
and
God!
It's like, it was the word. You couldn't do. There was no skirmish mode that didn't exist on the Nintendo 64 version. You could only play the campaign. You were like, do you want to play GDI or not? And then they had I think Memory Serves made some missions that you could do that were just unique scenarios, but otherwise that's all you could do and everything. And that began my love of the Command and Conquer series. And I was like, gosh, what a sad and embarrassing way to start my journey.
Yeah, those ports of RTSs to N64 were terrible. I was way into Blizzard games at the time, and I remember going crazy to pick up StarCraft on it, which I had no reason to because I had it on computer. But for some reason, I was like, I gotta get it on Nintendo 64. And it's like, oh, this is just garbage.
And I find this weird, and I don't know why I haven't. I think it's just laziness and I wouldn't say disinterest, but definitely there hasn't been a lot of good or big RTSs that have come out in a while. I've never played StarCraft ever. I played Warcraft. I played the hell out of Warcraft. I played Command and Conquer. Oh God, I'm trying to think of all the old RTS games that didn't make it over time that I remember playing.
Like Age of Empires.
I played a bit of Age of Empires. I didn't get super into that one. I like Total War. I always did like that.
Oh yeah, Total War.
Total War. Yeah, Total War Warhammer, the ones they have now. That's a blast.
I haven't tried any of those. I've watched people stream them, and they're really beautiful looking.
Oh, they're good. I put them almost in a different category between what Rome is and what this is. With the Warhammer ones, they know the Warhammer fan base. They're okay, The Warhammer universe wants one thing and one thing only: violence. More and more and more violence, and plenty of grimdark. Don't ever forget that. They will never.
It also seems that they want rules too. They like want really the deeper it can go, the better, is what I see in those games. Like there's a lot of complexity going on.
I know, and like that's what they did with the Warhammer Total Wars. If they simplified the city management a lot and everything. Like you're not fighting with like squalor and everything. And like, you know, you have to like balance what religions are inside of your city as far as how they affect your people and yada yada yada. It's a lot simpler than Rome as far as city management goes by leaps and bounds. But the combat, oh man, did they go nuts with that. I mean, you got everything you could dream of, I would think of that. You want giant elephants? They got giant elephants. They got dragons. They got guys riding dragons. They got little small dragons that skitter around the floor and spit acid in people's faces. It's just a grand old time. I think the only thing they haven't implemented was, if I remember right, Rome 2 had a naval battle system. Though I remember not being terribly fond of it, though. I didn't think it was like the best thing in the game. And they never added that to Warhammer 2, which is understandable. I don't know how you would balance that around having naval ships, but then like you also have a dude who rides a dragon, and it's like, well, how is that going to be how's this going to be a fair fight?
Yeah, I was always torn on the RTSs when they started introducing things like water and air into them, because then it just like it added that many more complex levels of complexity, because then it was like, all right, if I ignore like they had their own limitations, like generally the air stuff was always really expensive, and then the sea stuff, if the person was built too far inland, your sea stuff became useless. So then it was but it just like added all these levels of complexity of like, all right, if I'm going to invest in sea, then I got to know their tech tree and all that. And I always wanted it to just be like, let's just stick to the land, it's easier. Like everybody, we all are fighting on the same front then. If you make a bad call, especially because I used to love, for RTSs, for me, my fondest memories are always in the giant battles of like the 8-man free-for-alls or like the 4v4 team games.
Oh yeah, it's going absolutely wild. Oh God,
right. So then if you invest incorrectly,
Blood Gulch
you get
forever.
Screwed. For me it's Big Game Hunters on StarCraft is the most fun I can imagine having. I'm shocked you haven't played StarCraft. It's considered, it might be considered for along many RTS enthusiasts like the best one ever created, the original StarCraft. But
yeah, I know, and there's a lot of little holes in like my gaming history, and that's one of them. And it's not like I was put off by Spark. I was like, ew, no, I'm a Command and Conquer Puritan, thank you very much. It's like, no, like I really just don't know what it was. I just never got around to playing it. If I wanted my RTS fix, typically I did play Command and Conquer, Red Alert 2 and Tiberium Wars, probably the best.
I love Tiberium Wars. I loved it so much.
I like Tiberium Wars a lot. Red Alert was oh man, baby.
I think Red Alert 2 is generally the favorite out of those. I think I'm in a minority saying that Tiberium Wars was my favorite.
I put them distinct just because of the different settings that each of them are in. Which, side note, neat little nerd fact: back in the day, they weren't supposed to be in a separate setting. If memory serves me right, Red Alert was supposed to be an alternative history that eventually led to Tiberium and the Tiberium Wars and everything.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I love little tie-ins like that. It's a shame what they're doing with Command and Conquer now. How do you feel about all the moves to mobile with some of these games?
Oh God, Rivals. Fuck. Ha 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 ha. Oh, what joy. I'm not happy. I mean, I think it's neat that they're putting out a remaster, but that's 100% to save face of like, no, we care about Command and Conquer. Look, we're remaking your favorite one. Here you go. Yeah. We love and respect the old stuff. Yeah, but you playing the phone game though, right?
The Diablo Immortal thing. That you guys even own phones? That was so funny.
Baby.
I couldn't believe he said that. I was like, holy crap!
That poor bastard. He's
way to
out
poke
of a job.
the bear.
Yeah, whatever. God, that just. There's been so many PR things I feel like that have just been really botched between many different companies.
Oh yeah, and our favorite
Blizzard,
Bethesda, poor bastards, they're under
God,
fire right now,
getting
hardcore.
just torn apart right now. Of like
over and over again too, and it's like you can tell they pissed off so many people that now everybody's like sniffing around looking for dirt. So like then things that normally would have like went under the rug or people would have ignored are getting thrown into the news. Like today there was one, and now today I need to start dating these podcasts just so people can know why we're talking about stuff that's so old, because I tend to put them out like weeks after we have them. But this morning I read about ZeniMax. They have like a shady thing in their Bethesda account where when you sign up, you can't uncheck the box that opts into affiliate marketing. So then you have to go into your account after the fact and dig a few menus deep to uncheck it again. And so like now, like that's the type of thing that's so minimal. No one would have thought about it, but because of 76 and all the problems and like then, the bad marketing with the vinyl bags and like all those things, people are just dogpiling on them looking for cracks now.
I feel bad about that whole situation because, and I'll admit, I haven't gotten 76 yet because I've been well preoccupied enough as far as Fallout goes with this and everything that like I don't know the game super well. I haven't played it and I haven't dug super deep into it. I have to imagine a lot of this mess has been just like things that have been out of the devs' hands and everything. Like from what I have seen of 76, it was not a finished product. Not nearly. I mean, there were so many bugs that I heard of, like, when it first started and everything, that when we look for bugs and everything, like, sure, we find some after the fact, but all the, like, really bad ones, we typically iron out and give ourselves the room to do so before we launch. And it's like, they had to have been just put in a corner and be like, hey, so I know you just finished Fallout 4 and everything, and that's cool, that's fine. But we're going to need you to release another Fallout in, like, 2 years. Oh, how many years did it take for you to make 4? I don't care about that. Get on it.
Right.
We got the online licenses, and we're going to use it now.
Yeah,
I feel bad. Like, they had, like... The devs must just be like, this sucks. Like, everyone hates us now, and we tried our best.
Right. I mean, I think there's going to be a shift in the gaming industry after this year because it wasn't just Bethesda that released sloppy products or got in trouble. Like EA had several where they just made horrendous mistakes.
They're always the poster child of the most evil company ever. I don't think there's anything. But like now it's hitting
their sales though. Like the gamers are finally starting to. I think it's a combination of people are uniting because of the internet. And I think there's also there's just so many options now that you don't have to put up with the garbage. So like if a company releases a terrible game, you can just ignore it. So like for example, the Battlefront 2 thing, people have been pissed about microtransactions since they were first invented. Like nobody's been happy about that. And like that was just one of those ones where it was like, oh, we don't have to just play that game anyway. It was like there was a time when there was only like one good multiplayer game coming out at a time, and like if you wanted to be into a competitive multiplayer game, you just had to follow the latest game. That's not the case anymore. Now there's like a dozen you can choose from that are going to be highly populated, so there's no reason for you to stick with one that made a poor decision. And so like I think these companies are learning the lesson this year of like don't release unpolished stuff. Like it's just not worth it because it's almost like the gaming industry forgot about the most common thing that we know about humans, which is like first impressions are super important. Like we've known that forever, and like they just forgot that. And I think they got all game companies, and not just Bethesda. All game companies I think have been slipping on that regard of like we've got all these like early access and
man, as I understand the reason why early access existed, and a lot of times it's been a very useful tool for certain people, but I feel like it's definitely fostered an unhealthy like habit and culture of accepting unfinished products and just be like, oh, we'll fix it later, or like even if it's really close to being like finished, but it's not quite there, like it's just passable. And I feel like a lot of companies will take advantage of that if they can. If not, they already are and everything.
Well, I mean, it's telling that the most popular game in the world, Fortnite, is technically in early access still.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Like season 7 of early access. Like what?
I mean, it's like, and everyone's favorite game to crap on. God, I'm already forgetting its name and everything. Where you generate like 1 billion worlds and everything, and it was nowhere
No Man's
near...
Sky.
Oh baby, that was it. Yeah, like that's the poster child for something like that. That game wasn't even close to being done, like not at all. And granted, their marketing screwed themselves with that, which I don't even know how much
overhyped
they had.
To hell. Like you end up your game developers on the Tonight Show.
Exactly. It's like, this will revolutionize gaming. You will never see anything like this. 1 billion worlds, more planets than there actually are in our real universe. It's like, oh, dude, okay. If it's anything short of like full on Matrix style, just like stab something into the back of my head and take me in there, then I feel like there may be some disappointed people. But I mean, yeah, that game wasn't finished at all. And it's like, people are forgiving it now some people are forgiving it now that it's like, hey, it's playable now. Like they added all this stuff. They've lived up to what they said it was. And it's like, that's not acceptable. Like, I don't care if they live up to it now.
The difference was that they are like a tiny indie studio of,
a
couple dozen people versus the
context
AAA.
does matter.
Yeah.
But
like it's harder to give EA a pass. No one's giving EA a pass for making dumb decisions like, having to spend money to unlock powerful items or Bethesda now with 76 with all the bugs in it of like I think if it were one of the, like with 76 is obviously, closest to us just because of how involved we are in Fallout. But with 76, I think it's the combination of it was a very buggy release. It needed a couple more months of bug fixes, but it also doesn't. The game itself has a lot of issues gameplay wise, like where it's it lacks a lot of fun to it. Essentially, it's because they're trying to bend so many genres. They didn't really find a good. And there's a lot of people who are listening now are probably ecstatic about the game and awesome. Like I think it definitely has some. You can see there's something in there that could come out, but the fact that they're trying to do that post launch is not really good. Like that's not how you're going to keep people around.
It's such a decent deviation from the Fallout 4 formula. Or the Fallout 4 formula, good God. The Fallout formula. Like, I remember the legions of just frothing die-hard Fallout fans when Fallout 4 came out and they're like, you took the RPG out of my game and yada yada, which a lot of their complaints are warranted. I'm not gonna, they definitely took I would say they took a step back in the RPG aspect and then took a step forward in the gameplay because I tried going back to 3 in Vegas at one point. I could not take that gunplay anymore. Like the feel of it being a video game and everything is so much better now than it used to be. I could never go back to and accept like old Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas shooting. It's just
and there's also a lot of just like quality of life improvements, like the quick looting and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, but I remember when I first played it, I was just blown away by the improvements to the point where I forgot about the fact that I didn't have a lot of story decisions. And the first time I ever play through any of these games, that doesn't matter to me. Like I don't care about player choice usually. Like it sucks usually if you get to the end of a game and you can tell it's a pretty generic ending. Like that does suck. But up until that point, I'm usually so lost in the game. If the game is good enough, I don't care. Like I'm just lost in that playthrough in that moment. And that gets me, 100, 200 hours. That's a good value. If you get 200 hours of entertainment for $60, you can't beat that. I mean, I don't know about you, but my alternative expenditure to gaming has always been going out to the bar with friends, and $60 won't get you through an evening. So it's a pretty, to me, it's pretty easy. Like all video games to me are always the value. And I've heard people argue like that's a terrible way to look at things, but I don't know what else. I don't know how else to measure it. Like it's, if I'm looking at how many hours, it's literally like it's how many hours of leisure time and entertainment am I getting for my money? And like video games, you just can't beat. Even a bad video game, even Fallout 76, I've gotten my money's worth in that regard.
Yeah, when I look at Fallout 4 and 76 is That's its own beast. I'd have to play it and to better understand it before I can make a formulated opinion.
I would recommend waiting a bit. I'm sure give it 6 months and it'll be in a much better state.
I was gonna say I will give anything its fair shot. Like I will never judge it fully before I've given its fair shot. Fallout 4. I feel like that was in some way them making a compromise of they have to change the game and how it plays and everything. Because you couldn't just release Fallout 3 again with some spit and polish on that. Like that, just its gameplay alone, I don't think would be accepted nowadays. I don't think people would be okay with it just being that again and everything, but in a new place, and looking, a bit better and everything. And I think whatever they do, and I hope, I hope. I won't make assumptions because they clearly can make mistakes. They have already.
Yeah.
I hope the next Fallout is when they can be like, okay, we've changed how the gunplay works. We've changed how the game feels as a video game and everything. Now we can, look at what our shortfallings were that, taking away a lot of the RPG elements, some of the complexities with the story, yada, yada, yada. And can build from that, and then make the Fallout that everyone really wants. I would say the ideal would be the story and character complexity that New Vegas offered, combined with the gameplay and the game, and that feel for it that Fallout 4 had. Because I feel like the other ones don't compare as far as the gameplay goes. It's just...
Yeah, there's probably a tough. I think we're getting close to a point of where. There's a certain we're hitting the upper thresholds. We always talk about the uncanny valley with graphics where you can only go up so high, and I think we've been at that for a little while. I think most modern AAA games now, with the exception of Bethesda's titles, all have this just beautiful look to them. They just look really incredible, and even if they were to improve it from where they're at, it's going to be hard to notice. You're getting to a point where you can only add so much more to it to where it just becomes gratuitous, where it's all right, you had to put in, how many extra millions to get that little extra percentage of realism. I think the same thing is going to be happening with gameplay of we're tightening up the systems. Nobody wants to see, for example, the Call of Duty's controls change very much from where they're at. You have that formula and it's popular because it works. It feels right. And so you can only get, I think there's a point where most genres are going to get to a point where they feel right. And then you just have little bits of wiggle room and you've got to work within those. And then it's going to be more about changing the tone and the, what would you say, the setting, I guess, of where you're putting your game. Is it post-apocalyptic? Is it old world? Is it modern day? Things like that will be kind of fresh skins on it. And I think that with Fallout 4, it got one step closer to perfecting the core gameplay loop. And I think the question I would have is the story part, the way they changed it, because they basically took the story part and made it play more like Mass Effect. Which I wasn't, when I first saw it, I was actually really excited about that because I think Mass Effect was one of my favorite trilogies in gaming in quite a while. And so with Fallout 4, when I saw them reveal that dialogue system, I was like, that's awesome. I really liked it in BioWare's games. Why wouldn't I like it in Fallout? And I still like it, but it definitely, there's definitely something that you lose there in story. Something that I had to admit after discussing this with Gopher is that something about the voice protagonist definitely changes the core experience. But the point being is that is it the majority that wants that experience, and then, or does the majority want the old school RPG plus that gameplay? What part of Fallout 4 is what really got people excited? Because I think that's going to be the most important thing they have to figure out, because they've got to figure out what are the elements, because it's clear they don't know, and that's why we have 76 in the state that it's at. They don't know what the core best parts of their own game is, and that's got to be hard to find. I think you see it in every medium of we talk the sophomore slump we talk about, of the fact that when people do their second outing, they usually lose a lot of what made their thing special on the first time around. So like, what is it? What do you think? I mean, like we obviously like old school RPGs. We grew up on playing games for a long time, so that was like, it's up our wheelhouse. It's up our alley to want the RPG stuff. But is that everybody?
I think I look at Fallout 4 as them making a compromise of they needed to somehow make this work in the next generation of like consoles and games that were coming out and everything. And I think they realized they could not do that by keeping like the RPG elements the same way there was while leaving the gameplay as it was. I think they recognized if they could not make, like I said earlier, they could not make that shooting game that plays like the old Fallouts do the same. People would not accept it, I don't think. I think it would have been a big mess if they did that. And they're like, really? It's still the same. But I can very easily understand how and why people are mad. I think people are a little too far. Lord knows the internet loves its hyperbole, and that is the only language they speak. But like, I can think of back to Fallout New Vegas. I had a character once, playthrough I did, where I decided that this character was more or less just a savage madman. He was just a psycho who just kills everyone he sees and everything, except, he gets shot by Benny and you wake up in Doc's house and everything. And as far as I was like, role-playing the character, the only people he does not hurt is Goodsprings. Because they were the first people that helped him after him getting shot. So he likes everyone in Goodsprings and everyone else can die. And like, I remember like when you walk in... God, I'm trying to remember all the names. I think it was Betty. She was the one who ran the bar. And I walked in there, and one of the powder gangers was like yelling at her and everything, and like just being an ass to Betty. And immediately, the first thing I thought in my head when that guy like started threatening her was, "You don't talk to her that way!" And he just charged over, and I split him through with a machete, like no hesitation. And it's like, a playthrough like that wouldn't work in Fallout 4 because it doesn't offer a lot of the options for you to be able to play like that and everything.
Yeah.
And like all the missions, as far as how I dealt with the factions, I played it in a way in which I made sure that Goodsprings was okay in the end. That's all that mattered to this person and everything. Everything else didn't care. The world could burn, but Goodsprings is my friend because they helped me when I got shot. And I will viciously butcher anyone who dares stop me.
I think, there's a part of it is probably that the people that want that open experience and who are going to play a game long enough to get that are probably not a big enough audience to justify the cost, is probably what we're looking at. Is that the move to the more mainstream is just to like, it's kind of like I could see... Like people are upset when franchises go more mainstream because it means they're more dumbed down. But I think the alternative is that they can't go mainstream and they have to use lesser quality, like assets and production values. Like they have to remain smaller in scope. And like, I think that's what we're going to see with Otherworlds, which looks incredible. It looks like a sequel to New Vegas, but I think they've already been trying to set expectations of like, this is not going to be as big as New Vegas. We don't have the resources for that. We're a smaller company. And I think that might be the reality, is that those of us who love that stuff and really, we really appreciate the depth and everything, like it might be that we are a much smaller group than we would hope, and therefore are going to not get as nice of things. Like maybe, and part of that is why I think a lot of us have been accepting of the fact that Bethesda's games have always looked a little worse than the major competition. Is like, we're like, we don't care. We just want this like open experience, and the graphics are not as important. So like,
I'll always say this, please, and this is coming from you. You will understand this probably better than I do. Someone who has had, has worked with their engine intimately. For the love of God, please make a new engine. I will accept not having any new Elder Scrolls, new Fallout, whatever. I can take not having anything from you for like another 3 years or something. Like, you stop the other stuff. And just please make a new engine. For the love of God.
Yeah, we already know that's not happening.
Stop beating this dead horse.
They've already said their next 2 games are happening in it. And I mean, there's a lot of issues with it. I think that what they're doing is financially responsible. Is that they're, with each new game, they've essentially got their engine down to, like, it's kind of modular. So like the lighting part is done by one section, the physics are done by another, and those can be swapped out with newer things. So the problem is when you go full new, so you fully swap over everything, or you like, let's all go to Unreal. Now you have to have your entire staff retrained. So you need to have your artists have to relearn the workflows, your coders have to relearn, like everybody has to relearn everything. Coders maybe less so because a lot of their stuff's pretty low level, but each department essentially has to relearn their tools, and it's going to just take that much longer to learn. Well, the costs of labor don't change. So like you then are paying for them to learn, and you're paying for the extra development time in that. So it's kind of, you're increasing the amount of time before you have another game, essentially. So you're making that next game cost that much more, which might destroy you. Whereas if you do it one chunk at a time, like it's like, all right, we're switching to a new animation system for this next game, which means all of our animators have to be retrained, and their job's going to take a little longer. At least then you get some improvement, you get some incremental improvement, and you don't have to delay your whole game. I think that's kind of what Bethesda is doing, and that's why we're seeing this slow, grindy pace of change. The positive thing that I see there is that, and I see this a lot with indie titles too, where it's getting harder and harder to distinguish the lower tier studios from the AAA, because of that, you're getting to that point of getting those extra little percentages of benefit is harder and harder and not worth the cost. So as all those other studios kind of get to the top levels and they can't make any more progress, the other studios get to catch up because the technology is getting cheaper and easier to produce. And so, it's just it's happening too slowly because we've been spoiled with decades of like instant gratification.
There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of like crappy practices that video game companies, exhibit. But I will immediately recognize we gamers in many ways are just spoiled to the core. I mean, we want everything. We want the world and more and everything. And it's like, that is how it is. And I will always recognize there are definitely some really shifty, really shady, not okay stuff that a lot of game companies do and everything. And practices that should not be tolerated. But man, are we just a petulant bunch as well. Baby.
I don't think...
When we want to whine, man, oh man, do we whine.
I think not enough people in it understand the actual work that goes into it. I think I'm very forgiving with them because I fully understand it all because I'm a software developer. But I think all of us the people, everybody complaining or just everybody in general, we would love, what we want to see is give us, the modern version of Skyrim, but with like the graphics of all of the current generation games. Like just make that for us. How hard can that be? It's really hard.
Oh yeah, it's not easy at all.
So like to go to a new, there's just a lot of, I mean, it seems like on the surface, it should just be the same amount of work. It's like, well, they release a Call of Duty every year. How much harder can that? Well, they don't have to change. They don't have to redo their code. A lot of the animations they can reuse. The people already know the workflow. So it's a bigger ask than a lot of people think. And then the question is whether it's profitable or not to do that. The number of sales that they've had and the amount of re-releases they've had on Skyrim would say yes. People are hungry for that. And that's where I'm at. Is I think
Howard
they're moving.
said it himself at one of them. Didn't he say like, why are you gonna re-release Skyrim? And it's like, if you keep buying it. Like, I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember his exact quote.
Yeah, it was something like that.
What he said was totally true. It's like, yeah, they keep releasing Skyrim because people keep buying it. So, they will keep doing that.
I think what I see happening is they're fighting with the natural force that is, if you slow down, like if you don't keep expanding, you die. Like that just tends to be like the nature of things. And they're trying to expand, but I think they're going faster than their capabilities. And I think if they sacrifice too much of the core that makes them unique, somebody else is going to sneak up behind them and overtake them. Like we're going to see some other company move into that space of the fully open-ended RPG. Because there's Skyrim proves there's a hunger for it. The fact that there's that many people buying that game, like there's clearly a gigantic need for it, and it's not being filled by anybody right now. Because even like the next closest RPG that people are raving about is Witcher, and Witcher is closer to Fallout 4 in style as far as the narrative goes. Like you're on a much tighter track with your narrative than you are with something like with Skyrim, where you dropped into a world and you're a blank slate. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm saying like, there's probably a lot more choice in Witcher 3 than Fallout 4. I'm not saying that there's no choice in it. I just think that you're playing a specific character.
Yeah, as far as The Witcher goes, like you're a lot like. I think a lot of people praise it more for the world you get to explore far more than this. Like it's a fun and well-made story and everything. Like the story is enjoyable, but I would definitely say it is far more like railroaded than I think a lot of the diehard fanboys are going to ever admit. Like there's really there are certain changes you can do to reach the end, but the end will always be the same. Like it's not like Fallout 4 where God dang it, 4 it's consumed me. New Vegas where you could either watch the Legion burn or watch the NCR burn, or just say to hell with both of you and just I'm gonna just kick it in Vegas and get drunk all day. Whereas like The Witcher, it has one ending and you could take slightly different routes to get there, but it is still this one ending. And it's more so the journey, I think, that a lot of people really get out of that, of all the little mini side quests and everything and the weird adventures that those take you on and yada, yada, yada. But it's like with Bethesda, like, I'm not, like, stupid or anything. I know they can't stop making games to make a new engine. Like, that's obvious. That business-wise, that cannot happen. You can't stop all your video game production and everything. You always have to be having something coming out because you got to keep that cash flow. And, these employees aren't going to pay for themselves.
Right.
So it's like, and that, it makes sense that they would do the development of the engine incrementally over time. Like, okay, this game will fix this aspect of it. This time we'll fix this aspect of it and yada, yada. But, I don't know. It's rough. It's just rough. It's also rough because they've even as they're improving it, they've had such a history of their games. They're fun games, but there's a reason why there is like 1.5 billion memes of Bethesda games of glitches and everything of like, I touched my horse and it is now in the stratosphere somewhere. Goodbye. I loved you.
Yeah, I mean, to me that's one of those. It's a side effect of you keeping your game super open so people can mod it. Their games are very system oriented. So like when looking around in the creation kit, it's clearly a bunch of clever systems designed by programmers that to allow their designers to do whatever they want. The problem is once you start introducing a lot of clever systems, is they won't always play nice together, and there can be unintended consequences.
Oh yeah.
And you can tell that the designers are even struggling with it if you ever get into quest design. Like I've actually been doing a lot of quest work lately in preparation for things we're going to be releasing in the future. And I do a lot of cross-referencing with stuff in the vanilla game so I can figure things out more quickly. And I can see they did a lot of redundant like conditions, like to be like, okay, this scenario, like they're checking for all these potential scenarios, and a lot of them are overlapped where I'm like, well, those two things can never happen at the same time, so this is a redundant check. But I think they're so afraid of their systems melting down and breaking that they're just like, I would rather be over prepared than under prepared. And I get, and we can see why they would want to do that. In fact, most people would say they need to do more of that. But like when I think about the different systems, I'm like, well, they shouldn't need to do that. Like for example, with dialogue checks, they will often do things like, does the character match correctly? Like, is this the character that's supposed to speak this line? And then their characters have a thing called voice type, which matches their audio files to the character. You shouldn't have to then also check if the voice type matches, but they do that anyway. or like this will be like there'll be a check that's like make sure this character isn't dead when he's supposed to talk. Like that shouldn't even be possible, but clearly it happened at some point, so they're just doing it just in case. And like there's a lot of stuff like that, and that's part of the way they've designed their systems. And it gives them a lot of freedom. And I mean, like Todd Howard's on record saying we aren't going to change that because it gives us, it's the tools we're used to, and our designers can develop very quickly and make, kind of take their whatever they're thinking of and make it real. Like they have all their quest teams can work independently, and they're like level designers can do all their triggers, and they understand all that. So I get that. It would be real expensive to roll back, but
yeah, I mean it's just not realistic. Like as much as I'm certainly not the first person on the internet to be like, oh, they need to get rid of this shit engine and everything and just make a new one. Like I've heard that a million times, but it's just, you can't just drop everything, the tools that your guys have been working with forever, and just be like, all right, throw all your computers out, basically, just all of it, dump that stuff. Here's the new one.
Right. Everybody.
Well, come on, we haven't worked on a new game in 3 years. Get to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument there is that you see other studios. The argument against us, and like everybody who's been mad at us for the last 20 minutes, the argument against us is that there are other studios who change engines who have changed engines, and like they survived and were fine for it. So like it's possible, and that it's no excuse for if the engine is a problem, then maybe you should go away from it. There are enough videos going way more into detail on YouTube you can find about why the engine isn't the problem. So it's so I don't feel the need to defend Bethesda anymore in that regard, because I get at the core of it is, in this day and age with the amount of game options we have, there's just not a reason to put up with super buggy releases anymore. And if Bethesda doesn't find a solution to this and be releasing things that are a little more polished, or that focus back on what made Skyrim such a commercial success, somebody else is gonna step in and take over, because somebody else will find that magic formula and just.
Oh, I know. I've been seeing plenty of memes and everything of people like, give Obsidian the Fallout franchise someone who actually cares about him. Blah blah blah. People going maximum witch hunt with it all, right. Which again, they've certainly deserved some of this.
Well, part of the thing is we don't have a lot of super unique, interesting franchises at AAA level. If you look at like you've got a lot of like military modern shooters.
Oh, baby, more than you can count.
Right, and so like those are all they all kind of feel the same. Maybe the game, like there's obviously diehard fans in each of them, and like they have their differences. But from the outside, if you're just looking at, they kind of become a muddled blur. And then Fallout kind of stands out in that FPS genre with its style and its wacky humor, and it's a very unique thing, and it has a huge fan base of its origins and like that type of thing. So like I think part of it is what you just said. We just want to see, like, we hate seeing Fallout being in the AAA space. Is like that's the crux of the issue. Is that if it were still in a studio, if it was still in the hands of a studio like Obsidian, then those core elements we love about it would still be there. But my argument is that then we would lose out a lot of other things. So like but we'll find out. I think this is what something Outer Worlds is going to teach us: is can we have nice toys in a cool environment that we love. And I don't know.
Yeah. I'm hesitant with Outer Worlds and everything. I'll admit its trailer didn't exactly blow me away. I'm interested to see what Obsidian can do, because there's a lot of games that they've made that I love. I will love KOTOR forever, and I will die loving it.
Oh god, that's such a great game. Yeah.
Oh gosh. But I'm wary. I've learned not to let my old passions consume me and everything, and be like, I'll always trust you, Obsidian. Whoa. No, it has scorned me before, so we'll see.
I'm just curious if it's I'm curious which way it'll go, because I think that's the to me, I think there's enough people who are just passionate about the Fallout brand because it's so unique that seeing what happens to it in the AAA space is making people upset, because they're trying to hit all the buzz stuff. like the survival genre and focusing on the multiplayer and trying to make it more streamable, and like, capture the younger audience, which is where all the money is, because us old hands don't spend as much money on games as the kids do. Like, that's just fact. And it's way worse among Bethesda fans, because we'll just milk the same game for thousands of hours, and we won't spend
mods and mods.
Right. So we're spending even less on that. Although I would argue, and I made this argument with somebody else recently, that I end up spending exclusively on one company then, and then I tend to buy more merchandise then from them, because I'm like, because I get that much more passionate about their brand. So I would argue that the brand loyalty there is probably worth the fact that I don't maybe buy as many titles.
I've never been big on merchandise for whatever reason. It's not like there's definitely games I've played where I have bought stuff for them, but I don't know. I think it's just.
Oh, I have a huge collection of Fallout trinkets.
Oh, I think it's it's almost like some weird part of my brain doesn't want to fit the gamer stereotype of just like there's statuettes and trinkets and all manners of nonsense just spread about my entire place. Which also, as I have especially learned right now that, people have moved out and I'm basically cleaning out my entire place, is that clutter can be a real pain in the ass sometimes. When you have all this, like, I have a decent amount of like little knickknacks that's still sitting at my old desk, and I'm like, God, I have a lot of just dumb stuff sitting everywhere that I really don't need, and it's all over the place.
Yeah, I've definitely gone through cycles in my life where I feel the same way. I'm like, I don't want to fall into the niche, but I think at some point in my 30s, I just was like, you know what, that's me. Like, I am a massive nerd. I game all the time. I'm obsessed with it, like these particular franchises. Why shouldn't I have like a, this little cool looking prop from it? So it was just kind of embracing myself. But I definitely know what you mean about the not wanting to fall into that trap. And then I try and be very aware of the not holding on to crap. So like I don't pick up stuff unless I have somewhere specific to put it. Like I had all right, I got a space on my bookshelf. This mini nuke will fit here. Like I'll grab that. But like right now, my stuff's nice. It's all filled up nicely. I have nowhere to put anything new. So it would have to be. I think I'm now at a one in, one out state. Like if I wanted to get something new, I'm gonna have to get rid of something. Because and moving is a great time for that. I love one of my favorite parts about moving. Is the trashing of things. Like we'll just see how many trash bags of stuff we can get rid of and send over to Goodwill.
I still have like a whole room to go through with that, and it's gonna be a big one.
Yeah, I've got quite a pile of stuff to get rid of, because I tend to go through my stuff like twice a year in the winter and spring to get rid of the clothes before that season starts that I just either don't fit me, or I was like, I haven't worn this in 2 years. Like, this is stupid to hold on to. And God, this is gonna make me sound like first world problems. But I've got a mountain of clothing sitting in my on my bedroom floor right now that I need to take to Goodwill.
Yeah. Definitely when we were dealing with the move and everything, there was quite a lot of clothes that were getting donated, and yeah, there's a healthy amount I still have, just not just clothes, just things I haven't gone through yet, either mine or things that people have left behind. I'm like, all right, well, that's trash. This is trash. I think one thing, and it's like, especially when people move out and you really don't need the furniture, is there's a lot of furniture that you have to part with, and that can be painful sometimes. Because furniture is expensive, and you're going to have to replace it. But it's also like, this. You know what?
I see a solution right here, and I think everybody else is going to see this too. You've got all this extra junk, and you're missing furniture. Why aren't you building furniture out of the junk? Come on, man. You're an expert in that.
Oh yeah, there you go. I just carefully and deliberately place all the junk just perfectly around the place and everything. Just get it just right.
Make a couch out of your family's old stuff. Bam.
Oh, God.
Solve your problems.
Take
those game skills together and bring them into real world.
Oh Lord.
That's I actually love the aesthetic of Fallout, and I get why. Again, I'm pretty protective of it in that regard too, and would love to see it succeed more, just because I love the way they reuse all the random junk to make things. That aesthetic just appeals me to such a huge degree, and I have no idea why. because I wouldn't live like that. I wouldn't actually live in that kind of stuff. But man, does it look cool in a game.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like, that I've noted, like, looking at other mods and everything within the community. There's one thing I've never got and everything, and I'm sure I'll get flack for this because clearly the mods are popular. Of mods that add like modern guns to the game and everything, like you get to like run around with your M16 and like your M60 or just whatever. A lot of times it's very modern guns, like some scars or whatever. The sky's the limit. And every Fallout, they always come out with those, and they're always really popular. And it's like, I can understand if you want to add variety. One thing that I almost think New Vegas went a little too far at times is the variety of guns you can have to just whatever kind of character you want to make. Like, do they use heavy machine guns exclusively? Do they only, like, are they rootin' shooting cowboy and just always use lever actions and revolvers, Are they just shotgun for days?
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. Going too far. I agree with you on that. I'm not a big fan of all the modern weaponry because I know that there are differences.
I know.
Like there are little subtle differences that make a big deal, especially if you get way into shooters. And I think that you're talking about how we diverge from the majority, and like this is why, like those weapons are popular because for the same reason that half of the modern FPS games are all that modern day warfare type of stuff, is that there are enough players who like that nuance and want those like little differences. They know the feel of these particular weapons and they want to continue to have that in all of their games. I'm with you. I
remember a time in the 2000s, like early to mid 2000s, in which almost every shooter, be it AAA to even like some lesser known ones, but almost everyone had either Desert Eagle, the M9 Beretta, or what was it, a Glock. It like even if it wouldn't name those. That would be like pistol, heavy pistol, and things like that. But it would always, I gotta have my Beretta. Where's my Desert Eagle?
Yeah, I'm with you on I prefer the simplification. I prefer it slimmed down to like, here is the spirit of this weapon. Like here is here is your automatic rifle that has good mid range. Here is your sniper rifle that can, has good damage and works with a scope. Like I think you can pare it down to functionality, and that's definitely what I prefer. And I like that. I think Fallout hits most of it. I think there's a few gaps in there, and there are some great mods that can fill those in, or some stuff they did in the DLC. But yeah, I don't think all that stuff is necessary, and I also don't like seeing all the modern firearms in because it breaks that beautiful retro future that they have put together.
See, that's actually what more bothers me. I don't mind there as much being diversity. I only say like a little too much with New Vegas because once they added gun runners as well, there were so many damn guns in that game. I was like, oh jeez, I don't even know what to do with this all. But it's like, I like diversity. I think it's a good thing. I never agree with bringing all those like modern guns into the retro future world of Fallout and everything. Of like, I don't want to run around with, like, because I'm trying to think. Because I can't say, like, really the M16, because that was in the older games and everything.
Right.
Or
well, I mean, that's part of...
Rifles based off that, like, rifles that are directly based on that platform and everything. But then, like, it's like they almost, like, go through whatever most recent... like Call of Duty set in a modern age, or Battlefield 4 and everything, of like, cool, copy the entire lists of all those guns, like every gun that's in all those, bring them into Fallout. That's the mod.
To me, the mod system in Fallout 4 I thought was going to eliminate that, because it's like, okay, well now you can just make a set of mods that will make an assault rifle feel exactly like a SCAR, or like exactly like an AK. Like you should be able to just use the mod system to get those nuance, to get those little feels of like, I want something with, this kind of distance and this scope and this much, this big a mag size with this fire rate. Like you should be able to create like the actual, it's just a skin essentially on the gun.
I think that's what I think that's it. At the end of the day, that's what they care about. Like the functionality of it, they could copy and paste the stats from one of the like the combat rifle or something, and that that's enough for them. They just want it to look like an M16, a SCAR, or whatever. What plethora of modern guns exist nowadays, and everything, and it's like because it's always paired with it too of like the. You want to dress your character up as like a commando and everything. Like they have like modern like Kevlar armor and like body armor and everything, and like they were ripped right out of whatever modern shooter you could think of and everything. And just the most badass character you could ever conceive of. They got the balaclava, they got the armor, they got their backpack, they got all the bits and gubbins, and it's like. This is supposed to be the 60s and the 50s.
Right.
And everything. Like, this is supposed to
be
like
the argument is always it's not the 50s, it's the 2100s or the 2200s or almost 2300s now.
And if it was the 20, and it's it's what's the year set in right now? 2275, I think, something like that.
2287 maybe? 80. Somebody will fix it for us.
In that range. It's like okay, yeah. If we really want to play on that rule and everything, then none of them would probably be using any like. Everything would be flying. They'd like it would look unrecognizable like 200 years from now, over almost 300 years from like right now and everything. I can't even conceive of what weapons we'd be using at that point.
Oh man, I guess I can see an argument for the guns and armor from a staleness perspective. So I tend to focus more heavily on the settlement system when I play now than I do on the rest of the gameplay. I could see if there's a lot of players who do the opposite, who are like, to hell with the settlement system. I just want to play the game for the running through and killing guys because the gore system is really satisfying, and like the gunplay it's definitely not the best gunplay, but it's some of the best gunplay that also has some RPG elements and like the in an RPG facet, it's probably one of the better gunplay games available. And so like that combination plus the modability, it might just be a matter of the guns are popular because they add something new. So like you get to have more variety in your loot. You get to see something different on screen because your gun is what you see all the time. Like that's the one constant, unless you're in third person, which I think the majority play in first person. You pretty much are just the only thing you can guarantee is on screen all the time are your weapons. So then I could see an argument for having a bunch of different weapons, and even whether they're modern or otherwise, just new weapons are always super popular.
Yeah, like I totally understand and agree with adding variety to it. I think that's a good thing. I've always found it weird, and it's like, again, I'm aware of the challenges of like if you're a mod maker who's trying to add a new gun to Fallout and everything, like all the mods that had like pipe weapons and everything. It's like unless you can use like the assets already in the game, you have to start from scratch. And from what little work I've done with 3D modeling, that's not easy.
Right.
That's not easy at all to just start completely bare and just be like, all right.
Right, you have to come up with you have to do the whole concept too. It's not even just like you don't even have any things you can model off of. You literally have to think up the whole idea on a blank page.
Exactly. And it's like you also have to make a weapon that is thematically correct for Fallout and everything. Like it has to be one that looks and feels like it would be there. And that's not even getting involved into you have to make it fit the animations that already exist in the game, or God forbid you got to go get them done yourself, which that's a fun adventure.
I've got mad respect for the people who do that, because there are a handful of them out there and they are incredible. And there's a bunch of them coming out in the Creation Club that look amazing, like the new Zeton guns that people have been posting YouTube videos that look really sweet.
Yeah, I saw that a couple days ago, the Zeta guns and everything. That looks pretty good. So Zeta, man, that was a weird DLC.
It was. I didn't play it for the longest time, and then when I finally did, I had a good time with it, but it felt real bizarre.
I never knew how to feel about that one. That was just like, this is such an odd... Like, you go from Anchorage, which was pretty cool. I enjoyed that. Oh, God. Because it's like one of the only times where you get to actually experience the world before the bombs fell. And you get, like, no opportunities to really dig deep in, like, the papers, computers, and everything. Like, you just want to be able to rummage through a city or something. But it's like, no, you're in Alaska on a stealth operation and everything. So it's like, you get nothing. You're just there to kill. It's like, God damn it.
So I've always hated, and the reason I didn't play the DLC for so long, the Zeta and everything, is because I was kind of, when they started switching games over to DLC, I think Fallout 3 is the first one I cracked on, or actually played it, but I rejected DLC. I hated it so much because I was, I'm still in my head in the old school days of expansion packs where your expansion packs were essentially like asset flips. You would take all the stuff you did all that work on in the first game, and you would make a second game out of it essentially, but you would generally extend the original story. And so like it would be maybe 70% the length of the original game, maybe a little less than that. And then, a lot of the stuff looked the same. There'd be some new features, some new gameplay elements, but for the most part, it was a big asset flip. And I was okay with it because it extended the original story and it let me engage more with those characters. Now with the DLC, they go out of their way to make them their own world spaces. And to me, that's always, it makes it so much harder for me to invest in it. And then like with Fallout 3, they drew me in because of the one they did that continues the end of the story where you get to Broken Steel. Yeah. And I was like, yes, this is back to the way it used to, this is like how expansion packs used to be. And now, and I know they tried to tie in a little bit with, like, for example, Far Harbor has a tie-in with Nick, and Nuka World, you can do some stuff with Preston, but for the most part, they're completely isolated, and then it just makes it feel like, I don't know, I'm not into the whole, I guess the idea is kind of you become like a wandering superhero, essentially, and you're going around solving problems for people. But I get more into the character itself of like the journey of going from, a weakling to, solving the big crisis of the world. And then that's where I want it to end. But if they give me another crisis where I still am, it's continuing that same group of things. I don't know. It's really the same difference. It shouldn't matter, but something about it bothers me. And it's not even the money thing. Like I get, and I know we pay more for individual DLCs than we would have for the old school expansion packs. I don't even care about that. Something about those little episodic things, it just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to think of the last game where I really went crazy with an expansion pack. I think it was Dungeon Siege. Oh God, if I need to date myself anymore. Oh baby.
I ruined Dungeon Siege for myself immediately because I figured out we figured out at a LAN party that you could have characters follow each other and they would gain experience still. So then we would just we would take breaks and let one person have our other characters following them on the LAN and get leveled up. And so then it was just, it was almost like cheat codes.
I can immediately see that's not good.
So we burned ourselves out on the game in a weekend. Like we were just a bunch of us hanging out and we just rotate shifts of one guy is doing the actual playing. And then I was like, why are we doing this? This is so stupid.
Oh, jeez. Oh man.
Good game. Good game.
There is one thing I did appreciate with Dungeon Siege 1, which there were many aspects of Dungeon Siege 1 I appreciated, though I still think Dungeon Siege 2 was the superior one. It felt good just being a goon squad. Like when you get 8 people in Dungeon Siege 1 and you just roll up on some enemies and with the typical RPG fashion, it's there's the protagonist. They're essentially a walking god amongst mortals, pretty much. Yeah. They just are doom incarnate as far as these monsters are concerned, just slaughtering them in droves. And then you get a squad of 8 people that are all that, and it's this is a massacre. These people just roll across the countryside, slaughtering everything in their way.
The thing I remember most fondly about that game is that it was less special effects. I think, those style of games, when I try and play, I can't enjoy, I don't even care about the Diablo Immortal thing because I don't enjoy the Diablo series anymore. I loved Diablo 2, played loads of it. Diablo 3, it felt similar and some of the improvements seemed like they were necessary for the format of having more attacks than just your 2. But when I watch other people play games, the modern incarnations of those style of games, there's just the screen is just lit up with pyrotechnics. It's like the J.J. Abrams experience on your screen or the No, J.J. Abrams was the lights. Jerry Bruckheimer, like where you just got, the Transformers effect. That's what I was thinking of where I'm just like, I don't care anymore. Like I have no connection to what's happening on my screen. It's just like everything's exploding with every click.
Michael Bay.
Michael Bay. Thank you. Yeah, that's who I was thinking of. The Michael Bay effect, like that's what a lot of modern games look like to me, and I don't care. Like I'm completely disconnected from it. And then like Dungeon Siege was the last one I remember from that genre where it was more visceral, where it was more, individual attacks. And then your goon squads.
You had a button that could turn the blood on or off. Do you want kid mode?
I see. Now I'm a parent. Now I see the value of kid mode.
My parents didn't. They didn't.
Hey son, you want to check out this Fallout game? Let me turn off the blood.
Oh man, I remember when I was younger, I was not allowed to watch or play any of the Grand Theft Autos when my dad would play it and everything. Like I wasn't allowed to watch it. Sometimes he would let me, but my mom was really the one who enforced that. But yet my dad would like bring me into the living room and we'd watch like Band of Brothers together, all of it, like nothing held back and everything. Right. So it'd be like, you can't play that game, it's too dangerous, it'll poison your mind. By the way, do you want to watch a bunch of young boys run through what is essentially a meat grinder on a beach?
Yeah, ours the sensibilities we have in culture are really funny like that. Like I was talking to somebody recently about like the porn mods, like the fact that there's like this subset of mods that essentially turn like games like the Lover's Lab stuff. Yeah, that like turn Skyrim into like sex mods and stuff. And it's like, it's so funny that we're totally okay. Like, and I'm viscerally against those mods, and I don't understand why, because like realistically, you see sex, and this is the argument that CD Projekt Red gives, is you see sex in your real life. Nobody sees people getting their heads, well, some people do, but the average gamer does not see somebody getting their heads blown off in real life ever. So like, what is it that, that we decide that some things are okay and other things aren't? It's so weird.
Thing too. I mean, that's an issue well out of the scope of something you and I
can solve in a discussion.
Yeah. But it's like,
it's just weird. It's just funny that's how it goes.
Oh yeah, totally. And you see it in so much stuff, in books, in movies, games. I mean, just in culture in general, in all aspects of it. We're totally fine with watching just massacres. I mean, just absolute, complete bloodbath, total brutality. Doom times 5 on everyone. But the second you have any nudity, just even a little, oh Lord, someone's got to throw the book at it. And it's bad. That's become our Twitch reaction too. Like it's bad. Like even from a mind, like how we think about it, that we even have that reaction. That's our first reaction.
Like the reaction for me is it's visceral. It's not even like I care what other people think in that regard. I don't want it, and it's like, why? Like that's so bizarre.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird that for so many people, that's what that's their first reaction is like, no, that shouldn't be my game, or that shouldn't be in my movie. And it's like, why though? Like that's more real than like, we need sex to literally exist as a species. Like without that, it's just over. It's done. But
I mean, maybe, and that might actually be the reason. Like it might be that might be the reason.
We don't need to go on a run around with a shotgun and just blow everything away.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument part of it is like we've had so many people like brainwashing us that's the case. But I could say that what you just said, that that the sex is real and this stuff isn't, could be what it comes down to, is like we can enjoy all of the violence and the fact that we openly are blowing people's heads off in most of our games because it's so far from reality for us. Like it's not, it doesn't represent
America.
Right. Yes, I agree.
Unfortunately,
we are super. Most people who are listening to this or who play games like Fallout are completely insulated from the stuff that happens all over the world. And so like to us, then it just feels so unreal that we don't recoil from it. There's arguments that it's desensitization. I don't know, just being like a new dad now, I see like nothing's going to make my kid recoil. He doesn't understand what anything is. So I don't think it's native to us to be like, to recoil from anything in particular. But I would think like we can just like wash ourselves in it because it just feels so far from reality.
Yeah.
Like it might be harder to play. Maybe it's harder. Maybe not though. Maybe I think you could look at how many, soldiers who play video games still. Like, does it bother them more to play that stuff like after they've experienced it in real life?
I can actually speak somewhat to this, not personally, but my father was a veteran and everything. And, boy, violent video games was just all he ever did play. He would play the ever-loving hell out of Battlefield, and that never seemed to bother him terribly. And he had seen, like, a lot of combat. Ugh.
Yeah, so I don't understand. I don't know why. I just know that that's definitely so far from my reality that it doesn't, it's not going to faze me to see that. But for some reason, I see a sex mod, and I'm like, oh, why does that exist?
I think some things of the sex mods and everything, it's that they're almost never done tastefully. Like it's like it's a flood or nothing. Like you can't just open the gates just a little. Just let it pour out just a bit in a controlled stream. It's like no. Second it goes bam, blast. It's all coming right here right now, baby.
Right. Yeah, and maybe that's
like
why
they
we are
all dive into it head first.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like it goes right to hardcore. Whereas like I think the reason like no one really talks about this. I know it was like a little controversy when Witcher was being marketed originally, was that they were going to have sex in there. And no one talks about that anymore because I think they did it in a tasteful way, in a sense of like it's not like thrown in your face. It's not like it's kind of like how any like PG-13 movie that has some sex in it, it's just there in the back. It's just like it's just a scene that's going to happen. It's not right. Or like it feels either natural or it's like, it's not designed to get you off essentially. Whereas like the mods seem designed like to titillate. It's like, this is here so you can jerk off to it. Whereas in something like The Witcher, it was like, no, this is just here as part of the story.
I mean, it's like, The Witcher is sometimes hard to quantify as that big everything because that game is like the living definition of like a fantasy and everything. And I don't mean like its setting and everything of like you get to play as what is almost like the perfect man and everything who spends most of his time fighting monsters as a walking force of death, who has magic, who's part of this super cool, organization and is like I don't know exactly, like a magical being into of himself and sleeps with nothing but gorgeous magical women all day. It's like that's the ultimate fantasy fulfillment game I think I can conceive of right now. And a lot of people look over that fact, which I just laugh about.
Yeah, no, I would.
It's
see
still
that.
Fun. It's right. Totally. I'm not like bad. It's a fun game, but recognize it for what it is.
I would expect like if Superman were a real human, I would expect him to be with thousands of the most beautiful women in the world, because who wouldn't want to be? I'd go gay for Superman. Like, the man is he's the most powerful being there is. Like, of course people are falling over him. So like then The Witcher is that he's the equivalent in his universe. Why wouldn't women be falling all over him? And men, for that matter.
I feel like with Superman, he's just burnt toast. He's so boring. What are you talking about afterwards? Like when you're both laying there in bed afterwards. I mean, because Superman's too nice of a guy to just like have sex with you and then just bail. Just be like, all right, whatever. I might call, but probably not. Like, I would imagine he would probably, if nothing else, than his own just good old honest country boy efforts, would try to be a good lover.
Well, I think that's why they have him with he's with Lois. He'd
be so boring afterwards. I feel like, what are you talking about? He'd be. I have to. I mean, the potential things with him because of his powers. There's so much stuff you could try, but gosh, you would not be the one to initiate it. You would have to take the lead as far as sex goes. I feel like.
Oh man,
ladies and gentlemen,
you're reminding me of. This is like something I've heard Kevin
podcast.
This is
about
whatever. It's all nerd stuff. No, you're making me think of like when Kevin Smith talks about superheroes and he gets on all this stuff and it's hilarious. Like there's a thing in Mallrats of like Betty blows a load like a shotgun right through her back. Like, just Superman takes it to a whole weird level. If you want to start getting into the nuances of it, man, this went to X-rated podcast here versus our other ones. We keep it.
I've been trying to keep my language at a minute. Like I
don't really like try and restrict it.
Some of your stuff, and I realized I like dropped an F-bomb. I remember like, oh crap, he wanted it to keep the cursing down,
I don't even aim it that way. To me, cursing has been something I go through a love-hate relationship with it. So like I enjoy the feel of a good swearing, but it's when you drop the F-bomb all the time, it loses its effectiveness. That's something I recognize.
I recognize that. I curse
so like
too much,
I try and hold it back, just because then when I need it, then it's way more impactful. So like now if I say it, like people around me that are used to me not using it all the time anymore are going to be like, oh, all right, he needed that emphasis. And so it's like I'm trying to take back the power of those words by using them a little more sparingly.
That's fair. Yeah. Respect the language. I can respect that. I know I curse way too much, and it's a problem I got from my mother. Thanks. Thanks, Mom. Oh, I absolutely recognize it was her. That's not a doubt funny. In my mind. But as far as sex and games go, I think you have to look at it it's kind of, it makes me think of cutscenes as sort of a somewhat of a parallel of like, at what point is this a game anymore? Like, I don't think it was Heavy Rain. It might be Heavy Rain, but I remember there was one game I can think of that was decently popular in which you have to act out like the entirety of a sex scene, and like you have to like press X at the right time, and then you have to like rotate the joystick counterclockwise and everything as he's like fondling her or stripping her or taking her clothes off. And it's
Fancy,
like,
I think this is like one of those porn games you must have just downloaded.
Yeah.
This is that Skyrim mod on
Lovers
Lab we were talking about.
It was on PlayStation. I can't remember what it was, because it was like a lot of people were like, this is weird, because it's like how do you transfer, like how do you, and do you even want to like transfer the mechanics of sex in a video game of like, do you just mash that X button, come on, go ahead boy, give it to her, or something like that. Or something like that. And it's like it's weird and everything. It's a weird thing to try to translate to a game, to gameplay. And at the end of the day, you even have to ask yourself, do you even want to? Should you even really? Like, I don't think sex should be forbade in games. It's a part of human life, and it shouldn't just be, like, no, I don't want to look at it, I don't want to hear it, don't want to touch it. But it's like, how do you deal with that in the game? Do you just do keep it extra classy with a fade to black? Do you do like what Witcher had, where they have like cut scenes and everything, and they you can see they're starting to get into it and everything, and then it cuts to black after you get to see some TNA or
right.
what
Yeah, it's one of those. I think it's one of those weird things of that, like if they put in enough to where it's going to turn you on, then it like changes your mind state in such a way that it's kind of weird. Like, and then it's like I don't like
how
I don't
far
want,
do you want to take this? Because it's like
right. It's like this game put me to blue balls. Like, what I mean? Where do you want to push it in that regard?
You're in the middle of playing like Fallout 7 or something, and you're romancing one of the characters. Like, what do you do when they're just like getting real into like, they're just straight fucking and everything, and it's like, okay. Like, first of all, are you controlling that? Because that's a whole different thing. If you're like, use the scroll wheel, scroll back and forth.
Have you played?
Do the XAZ combo to pick her up against the wall. Like,
oh man,
do you unlock, like, how does mechanically that even work?
Right.
And if not, like, how do you as a game developer like come to terms with the fact that you're just like turning on your players and everything?
Right. And my mind's immediately going to
porn for your players.
Right. Well, my mind's going to Rockstar and like GTA 5 or Red Dead Redemption 2, where they have all these little mini games to simulate real life things. Like in GTA 5, you could do yoga like as a little mini game.
Yeah, I remember
like
that.
In RDR2 now, you can like clean your gun. If those games were to have sex in them, they would put the same amount of effort in.
Hey, San Andreas did, and it caused a big controversy. That was I remember that. That was a big stupid mess.
Right, but like even out, so it's like if there was no controversy, like do you, like what you're saying is, do you even want to put that in your game, knowing what it's going to do to your players? Like if you're developing it and you're thinking about it, and it's like sex is such a unique thing in that it like I think most guys can relate to the fact that like afterward, you just like, or like during, like leading up to and afterward, you feel like completely different people at each of those states. Like the chemicals involved in your brain, it's so weird.
Post-ejaculate clarity. There's the short moment right after you come and everything, and just for some reason, everything's clear in your mind, and you can think perfectly. And that's when like you really realize you really are an animal. If your best mental state is right after that, and it's like, God, I am pathetic.
Or like the bad decisions you might make right before that because of the
shame,
those chemicals, and then you get the shame fact afterward. And I think like that's something so unique to that part of us. Like you don't sit there playing, you're not sitting there shooting people and then like feeling like your brain chemistry altering to a way that makes you want to do different things. Like it's a totally different thing. Like if imagine there were something you could do on a screen that would make you feel high. I think that would be awkward for people to put into a game. Like if it was like, if people could just like get the same effects of THC by doing a certain activity in a game, like I bet that would be really controversial for people to put in, just because that
would be Jesus Christ, that would be a mess. Oh Lord, that existed. I mean, it's like, that's like, first of all, especially if you're really intending with the sex and everything, like you really work on it, make it detailed or whatever. It's like, okay, so I'm playing this game and now I have a boner, I guess. Cool. I mean, I was playing with a joystick, but now my joystick.
Oops. Yeah, it might be one of those moments where you're shamed into turning the game off.
What's the desired result out of the game? Like what
right.
do you
yeah,
want
I think that's
with this? What's the purpose of this being in here and everything? And if it's just for realism, then it's like, okay.
Well, that's the thing. I think there are two types of game designers. I think there's the engineer type who's just like, I want to do this because I can and I want to simulate realism. And then there are other people who put in a lot of the thought of, and you can see this if you watch interviews with the game directors, a lot of them, and some of them are probably, blowing smoke up our asses or fluffing themselves with it, where they're talking about, how they wanted to make the player feel and all that stuff. Some of them are real serious about it and they actually mean it. And you can tell they took the time. And the better games, they generally have those people who are like, they thought about the experience they want to give the player and then made the decisions about gameplay accordingly, and not just brute forcing things just for the sake of doing them. And I think that, you're right. Like I think only I would hope only the engineer types are the ones who are going to follow through and build the full sex simulators, as opposed to the people who are thinking about what they want you to experience in their game. Because if that's what they want you to experience, that seems a little creepy. But is it really creepy, or is it just going back to what we were talking about of this, like, where is this coming from? Of like, where is this puritanical feeling, that this gut instinct we have? Where does that come from?
I mean, yeah, and it's like, of course, it's like, it shouldn't feel creepy because sex shouldn't feel creepy because sex is natural and it's important. Just is it maybe because it's private? Is it like because you'd feel awkward if somebody walked in on you playing the game during that? Like, yes, it's something we all, it's natural and everything, but it's still private. I mean, maybe, I don't know, because that's so subjective. I mean, like, I know
True,
myself,
there are some people who don't care
I wouldn't
about
be
privacy.
bothered by that. I don't give two flying fucks when it comes to just sex and things like that. But like a lot of people, that would bother them. That would bother them quite a lot, I would imagine. And it's like, I think it comes back to it. A game, it is a game at the end of the day, and you need to look at what purpose does that serve in does it add to the experience of the game? Does that make I'm sure nowadays it would make the game a lot more memorable, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, what does it being in the game add or subtract from your experience? Is it a better game because it was in there or not, and everything? And there's gonna be everyone, a million people who are like, oh, they believe everything should be there in there and everything, and the realism and yada yada yada. But from a purely gameplay perspective, from your enjoyment, does it add anything? Does it make it? And I'm not just talking about, I got to see some tits, or I got to see a big old dick, like there's always going to be people that like, I'm happy just because I got to, enjoy that for a little while. I got to see, these character models that are sculpted to look like gods themselves and everything, and got to see them naked. That aside, with the functionality of you having to have sex with this person and like control that, would that be an enjoyable experience? I mean, because it's not enjoyable as real sex is, that's for sure. I mean, we're not there yet. We're getting there someday.
Right. I think, this subject will be reopened once VR becomes more mainstream.
Oh, man. Oh, baby. As these people was like,
part of it might
feedback
be
gloves and everything, like gloves where if you pick something up in the game, you can feel it in your hand, and it's like, man, we're
just a few steps away.
It's probably going to happen in our lifetimes too. That's the best part, because like you go backwards 50 years and look at how technology has advanced since then. I can't imagine what it's going to be like 50 years forward. And it's like,
right.
Oh Lord, I'm gonna like have a grandson or a great grandson who is just like attached to this machine doing God knows what, and I'm gonna look at them like, my God, that. I wish I had that when I was his age. Right. I probably think that.
You'd like to think you're going to be honorable about it and be like that and just looking down on him, but it's going to be like,
I'm not a good enough person to be like, boy, I wish I had the super sex machine when I was young. Boy, that would have been a hoot. I'm not good enough. I'm not high and mighty enough to think I'm better.
I think part of it might be ultimately like, it becomes taboo at the social level. Like people don't want to talk about it. So like it makes it automatically then, if it is in there, because people don't want to talk about it, it makes it that game's going to be less popular automatically. So it's almost like you're not going to see a lot of games pushing in that direction simply because because there's so many people who have this natural taboo, that they're not going to want to talk about it, which is going to make it hard to sell. Right. So then I think it's one of those things where maybe there's probably room for it to work in a regular gameplay sense, and like maybe the fact that they know they're getting you a little turned on can be part of the gameplay experience. But I don't think there's going to be enough people exploring that space to ever find out, because it's just too much. There's too.
I think it would almost require a paradigm shift for something like that.
Right.
For like everyone
it might be one of those things that just somebody tries it anyway. They're like, screw it, and they're just like, let's go against the grain and like just release something, and then it blows the few people who do try it convince other people to try it, and it makes its way up.
That'd be a hard sell.
It would be a hard sell, right? So yeah, I think that's the thing. It's always going to have an upward. They're always going to have an uphill battle, and so you're not going to see AAA studios kind of playing in that grounds. But maybe not. Maybe something like Witcher 3 starts to open the doors in that direction, and then their next game Cyberpunk will have a little more of it, and then it'll slowly
ready to
make
lose
its way
myself
up.
in Cyberpunk, man.
And I want to clarify to everybody listening to this that I'm not advocating or against. I'm just curious, like, what is up with sex in games? Because it's so taboo. I don't understand why. Because I don't get upset when there's sex in movies.
Kinggath, can you make like a stripper as one of the plots and everything? It's just a strip club. Yeah, can you do that? Yeah, I want to be able to sell people.
I have a scapegoat for not doing it. I have a scapegoat for not doing it in my mods, and that's that Bethesda.net doesn't allow it, and I like to release my mods there. So like I can just claim that for it. Honestly, I still don't know how to deal with my own repulsion to it, so I wouldn't put it in there. I'm not going to put the effort into it. But maybe that's it's not something I'm interested in. So I'm only interested in the curiosity of why do I have this feeling, and why is it that we are okay with mass murder in games, but we're not okay with sex in games. It's just an interesting thing. So
yeah,
if there's people, I guess what I'm getting at, there's people listening who are into that stuff. Great, go for it, man. I'm not. I just find, I don't know why, but it's just an interesting point to talk about of like what's the psychology behind it. How much of it is societal brainwashing? How much of it is just the fact that it's private? How much of it is shame? Like, there's probably a whole bunch of factors that go into it.
I think a lot of it is societal. Like I said, I think that's a very large, if not most of the thing. And at least in the context of games, you run into the issue of what purpose does it serve for the game?
Right. What's the purpose? Does it have any benefit to be there in the first place? And maybe that we've steered away from it because it doesn't have a function. But like the thing is you can take like the idea, like this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about the game wise, is the fact that games can be broken down into certain mechanics, and that a lot of what games are just reskinning the same sorts of mechanics. Like there are like the idea of if you break down any machine, you can break every single machine down into the 7 core machines. Like the 7 simple machines, they're all just more complex versions of those all cascaded onto each other. And the same thing happens when you analyze gameplay mechanics, is that if you take them down to a fundamental level, there are only so many gameplay mechanics. So then realistically, in that, if we want to frame it like that, then sex type things could be worked into one of those type of gameplay mechanics, and theoretically it should have the same amount of fun. So like, again, I think that ultimately it's like, well, if you can then do that, then why not just bypass the social problems and just put a different skin on it, and like, use others, like the violence or the simple puzzle stuff, or like, put a skin on it, on these simple gameplay mechanics that's just more palatable for the majority. And I think what comes down to.
It makes me think of like, if you take the same scenario and put it in movies, like you have to think of like, okay, what does it serve? Like, especially with movies, because movies are constrained by a time, because people are not going to sit there and watch, a 5-hour movie or something easily, or something like that. Like almost no one would, realistically. And it's like, okay, I don't know, like, your next movie comes out, who cares, whatever it is. Some Game of Thrones movie comes out and everything. And it's like, what if like, there's sex scenes galore in that show and everything. But what if like you're watching, like say you're just watching the show and everything, and then just for like a solid 20 minutes or something, because these two people are getting into a sex scene, and then it just holds on the sex scene, and then you just watch them have sex for 20 minutes or something, like however long they actually would have sex and everything. And it's like, there's no plot progression, like nothing's, the story's not going anywhere, nothing's happening and everything. It's just, hey, this episode you just spent like watched some people bang for a while. Right. It's like in a game, like that's it's a similar thing of like, if you just sit there and watch two bodies just smash into each other, for like 30 minutes, it's like, okay, well, I go start your next quest, I guess. Like, yeah,
I think like if we wanted to equate apples to apples there, the gameplay equivalent of doing that with violence would be to like have you over a person with a knife and choosing where to slice into them or something, like, and they don't do that in games because it's like it's too intense, it's too detail oriented, and it doesn't advance a plot.
Yeah, like what other than, being like, silly games like Hatred or something, where the entire where the the entire point of the game. Yeah, I'm sorry, you may be able to pick that up in the back. The whole point of the game is to be controversial. Like, look at you, you can walk up to these people as they're begging for their life and blow their brains out and everything. It's like, okay, like when the entire point of the game is to be that, then it makes sense in its context. Like the point of a sex game,
but that's going to be a pretty niche.
But it's like
thing,
if you're in Fallout and everything, and you have the like ability to, I don't know, disable, like, knock out or disable a raider and then just slowly torture them to death. It's like, okay, what is this? Like, why is this here? And everything.
Like they did. Yeah, there was a scene in GTA
life,
5.
Yeah, a raider would do this to someone, and it's like, okay, but you as a player, what are you getting out of slowly torturing this NPC? Like, what the hell?
Well, in like GTA 5, there's a scene in there where you torture somebody, and I think that served a narrative purpose in the moment of them actually torturing. But I think the reason that they actually had you do the torturing was kind of a statement of to be like you've got to feel this, because they like hooked up his heartbeat to your controller, and it was kind of like it was kind of put you in the shoes.
It was a cinematic moment. That's the thing.
Right.
It was a one-time thing, and it was supposed to be this big, intense cinematic moment. And yeah, it did have a purpose of like showing, the depravity of the character, of like they're actually so desperate in them needing to succeed that they'll do this and everything. I can't remember who the torturer was. It was Michael or Trevor. It was one of those two idiots. Yeah. But it's like for Michael, this is him just showing how desperate he is, and for Trevor's a fucking nut job in and of himself. So this is just highlighting that fact. But it's like, if you were playing Fallout as a raider and you just do that to like every random person,
every person,
yeah, it's like there's no character development because it's you playing. Like, it's not an NPC and you're discovering this sadistic side of them of like, holy crap, Preston, what the hell was that back there? If that happened, where you have a cutscene of Preston viciously torturing someone, you'd be like, yo, dude, what the fuck?
The tone of this game just changed dramatically.
Yo, what was that? But if you as a player are doing it, like, what gratification are you getting out of this? And if that is gratification, like you're getting some enjoyment out of it, whew, that's another story. That's a story for another time.
You just gave me a dark mod idea. What if like Preston turned out to be like a serial killer torturer?
My writer side is already going. The second I said it, it already started building a story around it. I'm not kidding. I can't stop myself from doing things like that.
Oh man. Well, this podcast took a direction I didn't expect. Hopefully our editor
we got your topics. Your
can find out if it's
baby.
Right. We can find out if it's going to get red flagged and get us in trouble on YouTube. But
this is getting demonetized. That's for damn.
Hopefully people find it enjoyable anyway. So this was a great talk. I had a good time. I didn't expect to be talking about sex mods and stuff, but hey, that's part of the fun of this, just seeing where people where the conversation kind of flows, because we touched on a lot of stuff that I've touched on with a lot of people that's just topical right now, which is Fallout 76 and whether Bethesda needs to go to a new engine. But that was a unique direction we took it in. Thank you for taking the time, Fancy.
Hey, you know what? Anytime, man. Anytime. And hey, because this is coming after Nuka World comes out, right?
Yeah, people already know about it. So if you want to say anything about it, go for it.
All right, cool. I hope y'all like it. I worked hard on it. I hate you all for making me make it. It had driven me insane in certain parts and everything. For some reason, pathing in that place I want to hurt someone. I can't say how many times I've yelled at my screen saying, just go up the stairs. Just go up the stairs. Just go up the stairs. Get up the goddamn stairs.
Well, we appreciate all the effort you put into making it look that good.
I'm excited to see what people think of it.
I think people, if they haven't, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't played enough to get to this point, but I think people are really going to love the gang layers, because they add so much to it. Just really adding so much style to it. I've been playing around a lot with the Disciples one.
Don's working on the other one, right? Cynical and Don.
Don's is going to be going, like, at the time we're recording this, Don is going to probably be doing what we described at the end of our OTC, like on the 0 hour before we release it. He'll be still playing with it.
Don, that poor boy, I love him to death, but God, he loves to give himself so much more work than he needs to. I mean,
it sounds like you do too. You wait till the last minute of that deadline and cram. So
that's just because I know I work best. Like, if I want the best quality out of my work, for whatever reason, that's how I get it. Like, when coming up to to these past few days, I think the last time we talked, you said that the deadline was the 12th for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like cranking it. I was like, holy moly. And then you like reinformed that it was the 28th. And I'm like, oh, it is? Well, it's almost done now. Because I killed myself.
The reason I don't tell you guys the actual release date is because there is so much processing I have to do after you turn in your stuff that if I tell everybody to turn in, I'm like, all right, we're releasing this the 28th, and everybody turns in their stuff in the last few days.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I don't have enough time to process it all.
Yeah, I know.
Right. So, but anyway. All right, man. Awesome talking with you. Do you have anything else you want to throw out there to the world before we end the call? Any personal projects you want to pitch?
Oh, gosh. All the projects that float through my mind are well beyond my capacity to be able to do. I mean, I am FanciestMoon. I am a buildy boy, and sometimes a righty boy. So, if someone needs help with that, by all means, hit me up.
Awesome.
I am, as I said, a sneaky little butt-grabbing goblin, slinking around in the shadows, making stuff without a name.
The butt grabbing goblin is probably why we got into the talk about sex. It's all your fault.
That's fine. I can. I'm a big boy. I recognize what I want in life, and butt grabbing goblins is probably it. So, come on, next mod. Let's go. Let's finish this up. We got goblins to make.
That's true. Right? We've got goblins to make. You heard it here
Elder
first.
Scrolls
Next mod
coming up. I expect us to have that ready by the next Elder Scrolls.
Right on. All right. Thanks for talking with me, man.
Hey, no problem. Glad to do it. Thanks for having me.